This meeting is called to order. This is the February 11th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We have a busy schedule, so we'll get right into our agenda items. Could I have a motion to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 28th and the February 3rd meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Announcements. We have a couple of announcements this evening. The first one is the deadline to register to vote for the presidential primary is tomorrow, February 12th, 2020, and the town clerk's office will be open until 8 p.m. We have some vacancies for people who are interested in applying to get onto some of our boards and commissions. We have a vacancy at this point for an alternate on the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have up to two people, two vacancies on the Historical Commission and one on the Commission on Disabilities. So you can go onto the website and check that out, or just send an email into selectman@shrewsburymass.gov and just express your interest. And finally, on President's Day, Monday, February 17th, trash will be collected. It's not a skip day anymore. So Monday, the 17th, trash will be collected. It'll be the regular route. So just look out your window in the morning, see if your friends got their stuff out and remind you. But, okay, that's it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. King.
this Friday, the 14th, there'll be the gathering at the Beale School for the final steel beam being in place for the school, 8:30. Everyone is invited to the extent they wish to join us.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have anything? No? Okay, Mr. Mizuka, do you have anything this evening?
Most of our time has been spent focused on the budget, which we'll present later, so I don't have anything beyond that.
Okay. Jeff, I can't see the clock. Is it 7:05?
7:02.
7:02?
Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't we skip down to item 11, which is to review and act on the request from Tom Parquet Limited Partnership on a request to tie into the water and sewer at 36 Edgemont. It's actually, as I understand it, only a water connection. The Parquets got delayed for a whole host of reasons and are requesting that they be allowed to make the connection now and not have to wait until April.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Given the background data on this and our past practices, I'd make a motion to approve with reasonable conditions set by the engineering department.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, there being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted? Yeah.
7:03.
7:03.
All right, just tell me when it's 7:05. Number 12 is to review and act on the appointment of Shai Wen Chen, 6 Crane Circle, to the Shrewsbury Cultural Council for a 3-year term to expire on February 10th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 13 is to review and act on the appointment of Kalamanje in Balagan, 6 Bittersweet Circle, to Shrewsbury Cultural Council for a 3-year term to expire on February 10th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And one more, and I apologize to the applicants if I got their name wrong, if I pronounced their name wrong. Item 14 is review and act on the appointment of Sandra Weed, 8 Blackstone Street, to the Cultural Council for a 3-year term to expire on February 10th,
Move
2023.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
7:05.
7:05, okay. Okay, our next order of business is a scheduled hearing at 7:05 PM It's a public hearing with Blazing Wings, Inc., DBA Buffalo Wild Wings, 476 Boston Turnpike, for transfer of an all-alcoholic beverage pouring license and common victuals license from BW Shrewsbury Operations LLC. Hours of operation, Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m., and Sunday, 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. Okay. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrew Upton on behalf of the Devlin Law Offices for the applicant. With me is Michael Gardner, the current manager of record and the proposed manager of record. What we are looking to do here is the national franchise. The national corporation is buying 5 franchise locations in Massachusetts, including this one. And as part of that, we need to transfer the liquor license from the current holder to the national holder. What it means for Shrewsbury is no change in the operation of the restaurant, no change in the floor plan, the menu, the hours, the personnel. It shouldn't be any different the day after the closing as the day before. And we have the same manager that we've had for 6.5 years, who's been doing a great job, has a clean record. So it's really just a corporate transaction, but with that, we're certainly glad to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
No.
No? It's pretty straightforward. Department said everything's all set, so we're okay with that. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard on this matter? Okay, there being none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Close the hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. What is the pleasure of the board?
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. All set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The license will go down to Boston now to get processed, okay? Okay, Val, you gotta wait again. Okay. Item 15 is to review and act on the one-day beer and wine request for Gregory Morelli, St. Mary's Parish, 20 Summer Street, for a fish fry on Friday, March 6th, from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 16 is to review and act on, review and act to sign the traffic rules and orders, Article 7, Section 10, obedience to isolated stop signs to include 2 stop signs, eastbound drivers on Amherst Road at Arch Street, and westbound drivers on Whitehall Circle and Arch Street.
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. We're going to move into correspondence. 18 is a letter dated January 24th, 2020, from Michael Sweeney, Massachusetts State Lottery Commission, regarding allowing Keno to go for Sperry's Liquors on Route 20. It's just informational, so noted. Item 19 is an email dated January 27th, 2020, from Kevin Krasneski, CMRPC, 1 Mercantile Street, Suite 520, Worcester, public meeting notice for February 5th. It's already passed, but that was just a public hearing on a proposed amendment for the tip. Item 20 is a letter dated January 27th from Michael Perna, Town Historian, letter of resignation as Town Historian for personal reasons, so noted. It's really unfortunate that he had to do that, but
Yeah.
just felt that he wasn't going to be able to fulfill his duties on that, and felt it would be better to resign, so I think you could draft a letter thanking him. Item 21 is a letter dated January 27th from Michael Perna, Shrewsbury Historic Commission. Again, a letter of resignation. So noted. Okay, are we doing time-wise? Item 22 is a letter dated January 28th from Mary Jude Pigsley, Department of Environmental Protection, regarding an EPA Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility Excellent Award to Keith, I think it's Labby. He's the Chief Contract Operator at the Westboro Treatment Plant, and works for Veolia, who runs the plant. They get an award for excellence as one of the best run in the country. So noted.
Good to go.
Good stuff. Okay. Okay, our next order of business is a 7:10 public hearing with Kevin Lindum, proposed manager for 81 Clinton Pub LLC, DBA Billy's Pub, 81 Clinton Street, for an all-alcohol beverage pouring license and entertainment license, hours of operation Sunday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Hours of entertainment Friday and Saturday, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Keith Lindum. I'm from Charlton, Massachusetts, and taking over the running of Billy's Pub.
Okay, and you are?
I'm Joe Duggan. I'm responsible for the building, property, and everything involved.
Okay. Okay, so we're just going to try to get your license back.
Yes,
We couldn't renew.
it's pretty much going to be the same operation as it was before, in as much as the same hours, the same aspects of it. The difference will be I'm going to be the on-property manager, running the business, making sure things are running the way they should be.
Okay. And you're listed as one of the owners,
Yes, sir.
and you're not listed as an owner?
I'm just on the building. I'm on the building and the property.
Okay. Okay. There's a few outstanding issues that we're going to have to address this evening. And one of them, I think, is going to prevent us from doing anything on the license this evening, for sure. We're told by the building inspector that you don't have a certificate of inspection.
The building is 100% ready for inspection. The architect and engineers are walking through it tomorrow morning, and we will be calling for the inspection tomorrow.
Okay, but you don't have one right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Hoping is that maybe you can vote on it, subject to that inspector coming Monday, and then we can get the process going, because we know we got to go to the state. It's just with so many issues. It was so expensive to fix everything, it just took a while.
Well, you know there's been issues, been going on for a while. You have another issue with unpaid real estate taxes?
I talked to, yes, I paid $23,000 last month, and then I talked to the town treasurer today, because Valerie was kind enough to tell me to give her a call, and I came in and saw her, and she gave me till July to pay it.
Did you write anything up? Did you write up a payment agreement?
Well, actually, when I came in, I talked to the girl, and then she called me back and said, you can have it July, and I'll put it down and I'll make notes.
Okay.
So I thought that would be enough for you guys.
Typically, it's not. You just have to have an agreement that you're going to pay it.
Yeah, I told her,
We'll have to see what the payment plan is, but.
just pay it in full by July. $23,000.
Actually, totally, with the personal property tax, it's $25,200, but,
No, she told me 23 and some change, because I just paid
I
$23,000.
have the paperwork I got from the office this afternoon, so I don't think 2,000 is going to make that much of a difference. You also, apparently, are the one I should be talking to, the water bill,
That's paid
when did you pay that?
last month. Paid that right up too.
Okay, we'll have to check with the water department as of this afternoon. He said it's not.
Yeah, we paid it.
Okay. We can
We
follow
did
up.
pay it, sir. When I'm not,
Okay, we'll check with them. A couple other things. On the entertainment license,
Yes, sir.
you have, right now, you have the common victuals, you're open, you can operate the restaurant.
right. We can't
If
until we
we-
get that occupancy permit.
If you had the certificate of inspection and we would, to so vote, you could serve alcohol again,
Right.
but you can't have entertainment until you meet the fire code for entertainment licenses, which was the code that came about after the Rhode Island fire.
Yes,
And you need to, we have a letter from the building inspector that you need to have a code review by an engineer.
yeah, we do, we have that.
Where is it?
Well, we turned it into the fire department. We just spent over $7,000 redoing the sprinklers in the fire department, the fire equipment.
No, that's different. I know you did that part.
Yeah, but.
This is specifically about the entertainment license.
Okay.
You have, it's because they changed the
Rhode Island
code.
Fire, yeah.
Because the other thing is, you have to have your sound system set up so that fire alarm goes off. The music it turns off automatically.
Right.
With the alarm. You have to have all that done, or you're not gonna be able to get the entertainment license.
Okay.
You have to wait on that.
We didn't do that.
Yeah, we could, I mean, that wouldn't be
We
an
didn't
issue if
know
we
about
could get, put that on a separate issue, and absolutely, that would be not an
Yeah,
issue.
we'll have to
Put
get
that, to
that
table
done.
that.
We didn't even know about that.
Okay. One more thing.
Yeah.
This isn't for you, apparently. So when the fire department or the building inspector, somebody went down, they discovered that there's a catering business running out of that building, Sarah's Cooking Company.
Yes.
That's against zoning in that zone. You have to go to the zoning board to get a variance on that, or a special permit. So is that still happening?
Well, not
It
really.
hasn't been happening since we've been kind of closed
Yeah,
down.
we've been closed.
You're not open at all right now?
No, sir.
No,
Oh, I thought you stayed open to certain food.
No, sir.
no, sir,
Okay,
we've been
all right.
closed since December 31st.
Okay. If
We're still paying the heat and the lights because
if you want to continue the Sarah's Cooking Company catering business, you have to go to the zoning board of appeals and get, I don't know if it's a variance or a special permit.
I'll make them, if they want to come back and do it, they'll have to do it.
That will be on them.
That's going to be on them. That's Tom Brady's crew.
What?
Sarah's Catering is Tom Brady's best buddy.
I don't think that's gonna carry much weight in the license.
No,
Okay. So those are the big issues that we have.
Caveats.
Now I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
We just went through these things, Kevin. No? On the application, it says that you're leasing the space. And then another part of the application said you're buying it for you bought it for $700,000. So,
well, he wants to lease it, and then once it gets going, then buy it.
is he leasing it, or are you buying it? It makes a difference on the license. When it goes to the ABCC, one of the regulations
Why don't you
is,
leave it as leasing, and then we'll change it.
okay, but you don't have a lease.
Yes, I give him one lease.
When did you give him the lease? Because you didn't submit it with your application.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Before the application can go to Boston, you have to have a copy of the lease to go with the application.
Okay.
That's state regulation. You're either gonna have a deed, or you gotta have a lease,
Okay.
okay?
We need that by Friday.
You need that by Friday?
We can have that by Friday without a problem.
All right, that's enough for now. So, that's all the technical stuff, I think. Anybody have questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention, we did receive an email late this afternoon relative to the discussion between the treasurer and Mr. Duggan.
I
That
didn't
we
see it.
We received an email at 4:38, forward that Mr. Duggan spoke with Ms. Gaudet at 4:20 this afternoon, and she told him she would need full payment for 18, 19, and 20, roughly $23K before July 1st, 2020, to catch up property in full. So that conversation did take place. It happened very late this afternoon, just as the building was closing, so I don't know if, I don't believe there's any kind of detailed payment agreement, but we do have something from the treasurer, tax collector.
Her payment was, make sure it's paid in full by July, but she said, as the restaurant's going, you're collecting the rent. Just give us what you can give us, and just make sure it's paid in full by July.
Thank you.
I appreciate you saying that, Mr. LeBeau. I didn't see that. Okay, we'll let that go for right now. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, then I'll add one more. as you know, when Mr. Larson, going back to when Mr. Larson owned the business, there were a lot of compliance issues down there, code compliance issues. And I know he tried to fix them, but I know it stretched out a long time, too. So,
We fixed them.
Well, this is a new chapter. Things are
Okay.
changing. There's been a lot of work.
That's why we're so busted out.
Between-
It's so expensive.
particularly because of the fire code and the life safety issues, I would imagine with the history, you're probably going to have walkthroughs a little more frequently than you normally would to make sure that everything's okay. And if it's not, they're going to report back to us.
Understandable.
And if they do, and it's not taken care of, your license could be in jeopardy.
We have I don't mean to butt in, but we have an alarm company called Night Security, and we paid a ton of money to get that whole alarm system perfect. And,
Was
the
it
only
just-
thing we didn't know about, that plug has to be hooked up to the alarms, go dead when it comes in, so we didn't know about
Talk with the
that.
fire department, they know.
Yeah, 'cause they've
I
walked
think they
through-
know I don't know if they're going to bounce you over to the building inspector, but I know they know the rules. If the taxes aren't paid by July 1, we accepted a state law that the board could,
Hold the license,
revoke it.
yeah. That's,
So, you know, it's built up over time, and I know you paid a good amount of it, but
Yeah, there's,
just be aware of that, okay?
we're not gonna let it
That's
slide.
that's not the business we want to be in.
Right, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of
And can I,
investment.
since
getting going.
October, I can show you receipts and canceled checks of close to $58,000 just to fix everything. You go in the hood, every time you turn around to get an inspection, you want to call, they come in and the Antle system's no good. The tanks are good for 12 years. What do you think our luck is? The tanks are dated 12 years and 3 months. So there's $5,000 right there.
Let me ask you a question. The building's owner is listed as, I'm going to get it wrong,
PSJ,
in New York?
yeah,
Who's that?
Friends of Duddy,
Okay. So who owns the building?
PSJ. But I'm in charge of the building, and I control everything.
Okay.
That's the best way to explain that.
Okay.
There's no mortgage.
Well, yeah, no, I saw that in there. And there's no ownership interest that you have in that?
No, sir.
I'm actually not the owner.
Yeah, he's in,
You and another fellow, right?
Yes.
I'm just a property.
All right, one other thing. Mr. Larson passed away a while ago. He's still on parts of your application. His email address, his name is the resident agent. On your articles, on your annual report, he's still listed. I know you fixed some of it, but apparently you didn't fix all of it.
That was probably for last year when he was on it. Now,
The latest one that's filed with the state, he's still on it. Listed as the
Resident,
resident agent.
yeah, he's a resident agent now.
All right. You need to change that. You need to get it right on your application,
It should have been done already.
okay? You might want to go through the application again and make sure that everything's right, because his email address is in there.
We're using that email address because it's already set up.
Okay.
We just
All right,
left.
you're still using that one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
The brothers had no problem when they come over. We told them we want to use it because we have the Keno, and the Keno's in Bobby Fuller's name, and we left everything the same because we didn't want to change anything.
Okay, so you're using it like it was
Like a
his
phone number.
business?
Yeah, we
Okay.
took it. We took
Okay,
it over.
all right, well, forget that. Just check the other thing at Secretary of State's office
okay.
with the filing.
I,
Okay, anything else?
You and the residents.
May I just ask a question?
Sure.
I don't mean to be, I guess, a stickler here, but there seems to be so many loose ends that we have an email, we have a conversation regarding taxes. As far as I know, we don't have we don't have anything in writing. We have one level of compliance that allows them to do one thing. Yet, until they pay their taxes or have a deal, we can't give them a liquor license, as I recall. And if they want to have an entertainment license, it's a separate request, and as of right now, we don't believe they comply with that.
And if they don't have the certificate of inspection they can't get the license.
So what are we doing this evening?
Oh, I was getting to that.
I was
So,
hoping if you guys could approve it, subject to the certificate of inspection.
What
So that we
what
can
would
get
we be
everything-
approving, though? That's what I'm lost.
they want to approve the license application.
You helped us out the last time we went for the entertainment license. You helped us out and you approved the entertainment license to help us expedite it. But we couldn't get the building certificate compliance done.
I realize that.
So if you can
I'm
help
just,
us out
I'm a
with
very
that-
simple person. I start here.
Yeah, it's
You owe
just that-
taxes. What's the deal? I see nothing in
It's
writing.
just, we need to start producing income with that
I understand.
building.
I understand that. But
Because
we
I'm
have one
heating
issue,
it.
taxes, and we got nothing in writing as far as I know. Right.
But that lady will give me one. She was really nice.
She's extremely nice. But it's still better to have a signed letter from a nice
Yeah,
person.
but he was wonderful. He kind of told you.
He's fantastic. There's not enough you can say about
I mean,
him.
I gotta be honest with you, the town of Shrewsbury's been so helpful. I mean, the fire department, the building inspector out of Boston, everybody's been good. It's just the cost and the money. Now, we made a deal. We promised the police that we were closing December 31st, and we didn't. We closed it at 8:30.
Okay.
I didn't even want anybody there later. We closed at
Okay.
8:30, and we haven't been there, and there's nothing going on.
Okay.
It's just that month of February, like $5,500 just to heat the building and the gas and, holy mac.
That's the result of not doing normal upkeep, right?
Yeah, well, there was a reason for that.
Wow.
There's a lot of stealing going on and a lot of bad stuff.
Well, unfortunately, that's not our issue.
So that's why I'm
Um,
saying, we'd like to get, if we can get an approval, subject to the inspection, and then if you want, I can get you that letter, and then I can get you that
The
lease.
lease, and that will
I
be
didn't mean to
everything.
point, by the way, I just,
Um,
I can get you everything, and
Hold
then,
on for a second. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Not at the moment.
No? Okay. Let me move on to one other thing, and then we can decide what we're going to do. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to be heard on this matter? Yes, sir. Okay, please identify yourself for the record.
Mark Roy, we live 8 Ira Ave, we're actually directly adjacent behind Billy's. We've owned the property, what, 8, 9 years now? I think we moved in, like, very briefly, Verona Grill, like, it was right after we moved in, closed down. Might have been even a few years later, more than that maybe, Billy's opened up. I've seen them working their butts off, trying to, get things in order. They're definitely trying. So the only thing I wanted to add is, having them there has definitely been a positive thing for the neighborhood and the area. And I know back maybe 2 years, when they did have the entertainment, that was definitely a very positive aspect of the business. A lot of times Friday, Saturday night, I would take my newborn in, in the evening to start our nighttime walk before putting her to bed. We would, just stop in, have, not drink really, but we would sit and listen to a couple songs and then, continue our walk. It was a very positive, atmosphere. I wasn't really sure, last year, people in the neighborhood, were against the entertainment license, or if it was, just hearing now this meeting, if it was really technical, it might be approved.
No, it wasn't because of complaints by residents, police department, so they have no issue with the license. It was all code issues, so, but thank you for saying that.
yeah.
So I just
Okay.
wanted to kind of cheerlead a little bit, see him every day, like, especially this guy, like, really working hard, trying to get things. So, keeping on going.
Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to be heard on this? Okay. I think we got input.
Can you recap what's missing?
Well, it sounds like we have a verbal agreement on the taxes, but we don't have a written one, which is what we usually require.
Taxes, a lease.
We don't have a certificate of inspection yet, which just is an absolute no license because of the regs.
The lease,
The
The lease.
lease, And then if they want the entertainment license, then they got the issue that they have to do with crowd safety and that for entertainment, so.
And then there's the names being not matching, right? in the-
Right, they just
Registered.
gotta fix that.
Yep.
That's on their, if the email, if they're still using the email address, there's a
Yeah,
couple other places.
Please,
They just
the
need to
reason the
change it.
vendors all have it, all the booze companies and
That's okay. So,
There's also the issue of different people feel differently on the utility, the water sewer.
you have
Chairman?
septic, right?
yeah, tell me about it.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
And perhaps you, through you, you could ask the applicant. Why not just table this thing? He can get his act together and just come back, because I'm wondering what does the organization benefit from a conditioned approval, given the number of things that need to be done?
My honest opinion is
But-
if you help, excuse me.
Anybody else have any comments on that? Okay. Personally, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think this should be continued.
I just think it gives you guys, I'm
That's
wondering
next
what you
meeting.
pick up.
Well, the pickup is, the fact is that we're gonna be closed yet another 2 weeks for another hearing. Then we've gotta be closed while we go for the Boston. So I was hoping that if I can get everything in place. Now, I understand about the entertainment license, because that's gonna involve the fire department and all that. So I'm not concerned about the entertainment license right now. If you don't mind, I'll pay for another hearing for the entertainment while I get, that was something I learned new about. So if I can get the liquor license approved, I can get you everything right away, and then I can call Boston, I can call for the inspection for Monday, get the certificate of occupancy, then I can make sure that the town administrator has the lease and has everything else that she's requesting, and have it all here by Friday, and then I'll have that inspection for Monday, and then it will be off and running, then maybe you can send off to Boston, so maybe we gain a week.
Again, a week or two.
Because it's costing about $1,700 a week.
No, we understand that, trust me, we constantly approve
Conditional.
with conditions, because we're, I would argue, a fair and pro-business board. I'm just looking at, I'm still, what do we have, 7 issues? Okay, so I'm looking at the 7 issues, and you need to get an agreement relative to the taxes in writing, signed by parties, to the satisfaction of the manager, in my humble opinion. And you get that done. Now, what does that allow you to do? What is it?
Without the certificate of inspection, it does
It
nothing.
does- Exactly. So I'm wondering, what are these study steps actually accomplishing? So how does he go about and get his inspections?
He has to
Call it
file,
in.
they were given a list of things to
Yep.
do. They-
For the local
so-
guys or Boston?
Our guys.
Boston.
Okay.
I don't think they're
He
bringing.
says Boston.
No, the liquor
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Local?
What?
occupancy.
It's our local
So he
inspection.
comes up with a tax agreement,
Your
he fixes
local
his
what?
paperwork, and then our local folks can go in and give him a fair review. Is that what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
but the building inspector is not your local, it's Boston.
Well, I think,
Mike Rogan is our contracted employee.
Okay.
Rogan, that's who you're
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah, no, he works for us. He's a contractor, works for us. Okay.
So that gets you your week, is what you're saying?
Gains us
That
a
can
week.
get you a week,
So we can
okay.
gain we can
I
gain a
understand, I
week.
understand. And then what's the next step,
And then the
Mr. Chairman?
entertainment, well,
We can
Forget the
table-
entertainment for
yeah.
now.
yeah.
Just push that to the
Let's
side.
get
That's just
that off the
clutter.
table.
That's
least-
not gonna happen
Yeah.
right away.
No, a lease is, you
But
know.
at least we know, we're
instantly.
learning.
The inspection will be called in tomorrow.
Then you've got a whole host of paperwork to get to Val's satisfaction.
By
So
Friday,
it's
she'll have
accurate.
everything she wants.
All right, so that does
She's
pick him
been
up a
wonderful
week.
helping us, trust me.
She's wonderful, no
And I
doubt.
tell you, I gotta be honest, the whole
hope you would be,
town has
Joe.
been so great, it's just,
hope you would be.
holy mackerel, it's just the building was so bad. Didn't know this.
Well, part of my hesitance is that, I know it was different person running it at the time, but
Yes.
the building issues, which weren't as much the business issue, had gone on for quite a while. Because I know, I was down there once I tagged along with the fire inspector, the building inspector, the electrical inspector, on an inspection down there when the former town manager was here. and that's going on 3 years. So my hesitancy is this really going to get done?
It's gonna be done. That was Jimmy. And then the problem was he wouldn't tell us he wouldn't say what was going on. Then you find out after the fact.
But if you were the owner of the business, you should have found out what was going
I
on.
didn't own the business. I owned the building, but he never told me.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry. When you owned the building, they should have been dealing with
But he
you.
never told me. Then finally, I'm finding out about all these things because I get a call from the Colby, the fire chief, and he says, Joe, you need to meet me over there. And then I go over, and next thing you know, I call up night security, and night security comes, and then I bring Thaddeus in, which is the engineer that we hired to go into construction control so we can deal with Boston. And then right away, you get your eyes opened up, like, what? You know, you didn't even know any of this stuff. So you have to get updated equipment, you know, and get it all up. That's how the kitchen, like the kitchen, 12 years and 3 months on the Antle system. I mean, you know, that's safety. I mean, if the kitchen caught a fire,
That's on you. It's not on us.
yeah, but the thing is, I'm not in the kitchen.
Let me
Jimmy was, and you know.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You have experience in the restaurant business, right?
I actually do.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just want to make sure. I just got to
This
ask.
is why we know we can do much better.
What's, any other thoughts? Is either we got to close the hearing or make a decision to continue it?
I have a question. Mr. Duggan, how long have you been actively involved in the management of that building and the property?
The property, I got involved in 2016. And I pretty much just got involved to, you know, maintenance, plowing, roof leak, to something. As far as the inside the building, I didn't know anything about going on in there because I don't know the restaurant business and I don't know what's required. And Jimmy was alive, okay, and I trusted him. I actually lent him money, you know, for the business. And I didn't know anything. And then I got a lesson in reality. I got a lesson in reality last summer because after he died, I didn't even know what was going on. Because his brothers are such nice people, wonderful people. They came in and took over so that the 18 employees could still work. But there was so many things going on, nobody would tell us anything. I mean, you know, finally it got to the point where everything was going wrong, and now I had to get involved. So then I got involved, and boy, I'll tell you what, it's like now, it's like right away, like tomorrow, we've got to call, I want to call in for the inspection, but I want Thaddeus to come over, John Real Associates come over, walk through, because they seem to find things. Joe, you know you need a cover?
Right.
You know, something as small as that.
But Mr. Duggan, you've been the ownership's agent, point
Since
on the
2000
ground
yeah,
since
August
2016?
2016.
Okay.
So,
But I never took the time to be involved in the restaurant because I thought it was all good. Then when Jimmy died, that's when everything hit the fan. Now the bartenders are calling me up saying we can't get booze. Why?
well,
It's not paid, so I go and pay it for them.
they actually were shut down once before, and that was at least 3 years ago.
No, I think it was 2.
Now it was 3 because the other town manager was here. So,
Um,
in any event, it seems
I know
like
what
everybody's
Keith-
hesitant. My preference would be, and I'm only one member of the board, is to continue this for 2 weeks. I just think there's too many balls in the air right now, myself, right? Sounds like Mr. Kane agrees with that. I'm not hearing anything from anybody else, so what do you want to do?
To me, there's too many unresolved issues, and I am not prepared to move forward with a conditional license this evening.
All right,
I agree with that. I think the
Okay.
2 weeks to get some of these things in order, and then I'd feel more comfortable moving forward with it.
if everything's all set in 2 weeks, we'll vote.
Okay.
All right, let me, can you, okay. I appreciate, anyway, you guys
Right.
trying to help us, but now after you vote, it's got to go to the state, am I correct?
Mhm.
How much time is that?
We don't control the
I-
state.
like, I'm asking because I got to try to
don't-
find
we don't
money to
control the
keep us heated so the pipes don't get broken and,
Take about a
How much
minute.
time does it take to get the results from the state?
yeah.
Anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on what their backlog is. I've seen it take 2 weeks, I've seen it take 2 months, so it really just depends on what they have.
Oh, boy.
All right. I don't think we're going to cover any new ground right now, so I'd entertain a motion to continue the hearing till February 25th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. All right, get 2 weeks.
Thank you, sir.
Great.
Valerie, you gonna put a list together so I can just bring this stuff in?
Yeah, you can just
Can you
call the
email
office.
it to me?
Yep, call the office tomorrow.
Make my, because you've been helping me a lot, so
She's the best.
just email.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Okay. Where are we? Okay. Next order of business is a presentation from MassDOT regarding the Route 20 Corridor Master Plan Study. Somebody here, I knew there was somebody here from the guy. Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Are you ready?
Yep. You don't have to stay there if you want. You can sit at the table. It's up to you.
Sure, actually, I'm only going to give a couple of opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Paul and to Erin.
And you're Mr. Lorian, right?
Yes, yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us. My name is Barry Lorian. I'm the Highway Director for the District 3 Office of Mass DOT in Shrewsbury, formerly of Worcester, temporarily in Shrewsbury. We are here tonight to talk a little bit about the Route 20 Corridor Master Plan, and I know you've already seen that a couple of times, so we wanted to give you kind of a final update. I'm joined here by colleague Erin Kinahan from Mass DOT, Bob Stathopoulos from HSH, Howard Stein Hudson, right here, and Paul Nelson also from Howard Stein Hudson. Tonight is a preview and a condensed version of what we intend to present at the final public informational meeting scheduled for March 4th at the library at 7 p.m. The study is a corridor master plan or a framework that provides the town and Mass DOT with a preferred roadway concept that addresses safety and future demands, including pedestrians and bicyclists. The expectation is that over time, Mass DOT, the town, the development community will implement portions of the plan as needed to address safety and capacity concerns, allow for continued economic development along the corridor. This effort began over 3.5 years ago when Representative Kane contacted Mass DOT with safety concerns in the area of Walnut Street and South Street and Valente Drive. From there, it grew to become a vision of the future of Route 20 in Shrewsbury. Before we get started with the presentation, and it will only take about 10 minutes or so, I did want to thank Kevin Mizikar for your help with this, and of course, Kristen Lass for all of your help, and Jeff Howland, who isn't here tonight, but the three of them were instrumental in helping guide us along and provide us with input. And of course, a special thanks to our Representative Kane, who really brought this to our attention initially and kept us moving the whole time.
Okay, Ms. Lorian, before
Sure.
they start, the last MPO meeting, one of the consulting engineering companies presented the work for Grafton Street and Route 20, and to get a preliminary presentation to try to get that placed on the tip.
Sure.
And I know it was just introductory, but I was curious, is MassDOT, is the intention to fund that through the TIP program, or is it to get it on the TIP so that there are other funds that you can use to expedite that?
My understanding is that is a TIP project, and regional targeted funds would be used for that project.
Okay. So that could take a while. Sounded like they were trying to get it fast-tracked a little bit if there was some funding available, but.
Sure, so I'm not sure where it is on the tip, but I can certainly get that
Oh,
information.
it's not on
for you.
yet. They just presented at the last meeting. I think we'll get more information on it in the next meeting next week.
So I'm happy to follow up too and give you any
Okay,
additional
I was just wondering
information.
if you knew.
Yeah, I did not know. I know that the tip is under development at this time.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay,
So I'll turn it over to Paul. I think, Paul, you were going to walk us through the presentation?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Board, thank you so much for having us here tonight. So what I haven't handed out and what we have on the board here is kind of about 15 slides that we, like Barry said, will form the foundation of the presentation made to the public on March 4th. So as I go through it, I'll kind of be both summarizing what the slide says and what we're hoping to communicate to the public when we were looking for their feedback. So if you don't mind moving through, I think the first slide will introduce us again. If you go to the next one, please.
Yeah, it's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize. Then I will do that. So we'll start with an introduction like we have tonight. Thank you. And then review the agenda, primarily focusing on, major findings from the master plan process, and transitioning into the next steps that should be expected for projects. So looking at, as part of the plan process, the overview of the master plan, the key findings from our assessment, and the steps that were taken to address comments that we received from the public. And then a discussion of likely future projects and featuring some of those, and then talking about the next steps for implementation in many of those cases. So first, what we wanted to start off with is a master plan. Sometimes, there are a lot of different ways you can study transportation. So in this case, we're looking at Route 20 as a master plan. And primarily, that's meant to create a unified vision for a roadway corridor where it's really too long to plan one big project to improve it. And in doing so, you identify and quantify the primary factors, driving those needs for improvements so that they can be justified for funding from the different sources available, and provides an overall conceptual design. But as the next bullet notes, a lot of the design details would still be determined at a later date as it goes through the stages of design. And then also just kind of as a disclaimer, having it in the master plan doesn't guarantee that all of it will be implemented. There's still some work that needs to be done. So just as far as the limits and the extents of the projects, we looked at over 25 intersections along Route 20 from the Worcester line into and to the Northborough line, and actually including a few intersections in the sections of Northborough on Route 20. And some of the key findings is that there's a lot of elements tied to intersection and corridor safety that needed to be addressed, especially at the intersections noted: Valente Drive and Walnut Street, South Street, Stony Hill Road, Grafton Street, and the Route 140 interchange, and at Lake Street. There's also congestion issues and access management. Many driveways accessing Route 20, which has a high speed limit, so that makes it difficult to enter. And also additional capacity needed in some places to meet the current traffic levels, and in more of those places to meet future demand as the corridors redeveloped. And also a lack of pedestrian and bicycle accommodations in the corridor that we're hoping to address with the concept. So the proposed master plan would provide a full 2 travel lanes in each direction on Route 20, and the current corridor has a mix of 2 and 1 lane in each direction. It would be tied to traffic signal improvements and the addition of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, primarily a shared use path along the south side of the corridor with sidewalks on the north side to allow continuity between properties. Looking at ways to address safety at the locations that have been deemed deficient, and also a secondary disclaimer to this that, this cross-section is a lot wider in many places, so there would be potential right-of-way acquisition needed and potential environmental impacts that would need to be addressed further down the line. And so this is kind of just the example of what the cross-section looks like. It changes a little bit, and what we're planning to do at the meeting is have the full rollout plan so that people can go through and take a look at different sections that they might be interested in and provide feedback to us. We've done that at other meetings, and that's been pretty successful. But in general, what you're looking at is to the right of the screen would be the south side of Route 20. And so that's where you have that 10-foot shared use path is what the SUP stands for. And then there would be both a vegetated buffer and a shoulder providing some separation between that path and the vehicles on Route 20. And there you'd have, 11-foot travel lanes with a 4-foot buffer, painted buffer between them, and then the lanes in the opposite direction. And again, a shoulder and vegetated buffer to the 5.5-foot sidewalk. And that buffer in the middle of the lanes can be narrowed in certain locations, and it would be widened in other locations to provide two-way left turn lanes where there's multiple driveways.
Can I ask a question, or should we wait till the end? Can I just ask you a question? One of the limiting factors is obviously I'm going to call it a bridge abutment, I don't know if you call it that, but at Route 140 and 20, obviously you've got the bridge there.
Yes.
It's not 78 feet, as I recall. Can it possibly be?
No, I think we looked at the Route 140 bridge, and I think it would be we'd have to look at that in more depth, I think, as improvements go through there. One of the possibilities we were looking at was actually having the sidewalks pass where the bridge abutments currently are.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to do some additional work to bring that back. But there's definitely not the width between the piers there.
So does this forecast any bridge reconstruction of that area, or primarily stay within the existing right-of-way and the structures as they sit today?
I think I'll defer to the MassDOT staff, but I would think that the bridge reconstruction would be such a large expense that it probably wouldn't make the project competitive for funding. So I think that you'd try to seek any other, as long as the bridge is in good condition, you'd probably seek other ways to address that first. And then if you really had to, you'd go to a bridge.
Okay, thank you.
widening. Yep. And so some of the other elements is we received feedback from the public that we wanted to make sure we addressed in presenting this plan. And kind of three of the main areas that we saw was there was a lot of concern about cut-through traffic coming from the Westboro MBTA station going onto Walnut Street. And what we found is that there's definitely been growth in traffic on Walnut Street. It's kind of hard to tell, we're not interviewing everybody there if they came from the MBTA station, but we think that there is some traffic that's doing that. And so one of the things in the master plan is there was also a safety concern at Walnut Street, and so the master plan, which I'll show you later, has a tie-in to Valenti Drive, which we think would discourage some of that cut-through traffic. And then the other two elements are tied to really safety from turning from side streets onto Route 20. And one of those was raised at South Street, where there was an incident with folks from the school there. And so we took a look at whether it met a signal warrant, and a signal warrant is a series of criteria that are generally, they're required by the MUTCD, which is the guiding document for that, when you can issue a signal. And based on the results of that and the spacing with the South Street, Green Street signal, what we're proposing in the master plan is instead of putting a signal there, but to actually just limit turns to right turns only out from South Street as a safer solution. And then entering Route 20 from Stony Hill Road. Again, that traffic is too light on the side street really to meet the warrants for a full traffic signal. But what we did with the design is the Route 20 in that section will have a two-way left turn lane. And we're hoping that the final design for that can allow people to basically cross one direction of traffic, wait for a gap in the other and proceed, and that would be a safer arrangement for them. And if all else fails, there is the ability to take a right and do a U-turn at the Centec Boulevard intersection. And then what we're hoping to do with this is kind of review some of the future improvement projects, and these were kind of partially selected because there is some work being done in the corridor. Like you said, there's been a plan presented for Grafton Street. So Grafton Street is a high crash location. It's potentially eligible for dedicated federal safety funds or as a TIP project. So that's one of the ones that we'll be highlighting. Lake Street intersection, that's a different kind of scenario. So we're really hoping to communicate that there are a lot of different ways that these things could be done as the corridor develops and there's interest in different parts of it. And there, with the Edgemere redevelopment site, there's the possibility that there's the likelihood that that'll be reconstructed, jointly funded both by the developer and a MassWorks grant. And then, another project that maybe has potential is looking at South Street and Valenti Drive, that section to increase safety. And there you'd actually have to, if those were selected, you'd actually have to go through and do the full project initiation through MassDOT, because those aren't currently identified as projects.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I was at least one of those hearings, and there was a lot of discussion about South Street, as you know. Was there any thought given to doing the same thing at South Street and bringing it out to Green Street to get to the light. I know there's wetlands there, but there must be buildable land there because it's being advertised now for 39 acres for development. So
Well,
was there any thought that,
The thought of doing a similar connection, as in providing a connection between South Street and Green Street, separate from Route 20, was looked at, but at the time, the wetlands where that's why we didn't include it, was because the wetlands are present there. I don't think the door's completely closed on that as an alignment, but we could take a closer look, because at this stage, since it's really more of a big picture plan, we're not actually surveying the individual wetland
Right.
lines and things like that.
but
So
it's not out of the realm of possibility if
I-
it could, I realize at some point down the road, it could be considered.
I think so. I think,
I think it could. Nothing here is set in stone, but I do recall, we took a look at that concept, and there were a significant amount of wetlands and wetland impacts, unless you really pushed the road way back, the connecting road way back. So, yeah, it wasn't something that we thought was feasible now, and we didn't put it in the plan, but it isn't necessarily precluded entirely.
Okay, thank you.
and so what we're hoping to, so this here shows the master plan concept at Grafton Street. And obviously, we updated this at the time to the current status of that design project done by another firm. But here, you can see that it's adding turn lanes to provide access both at the Grafton Street intersection, but also to Flynn's truck stop, and also providing 2 lanes eastbound on 140 through there. So those are some of the elements that were included in the master plan.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
As I read this sheet, the green dotted area, and then there's a red dotted, are those to signify land takings?
No, the green dotted area is meant to, the green dotted area is meant to show basically the limits of work at this stage, assuming that we can kind of grade out from the sidewalks. The red is actually overhead power lines. It's just something that we wanted to identify. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So where they might need to be pushed back, because utility relocation would be part of it. But I believe in this case, we held I think we held the northern property line, and in this case, you would have impacts on the southern property. So it's not set in stone exactly how this
Yeah.
works, but we would work with
Are
the
you
butters to do that.
tightening up curb cuts and closing any?
I don't
Or am
think
I
we
early
have
for
it
this?
in the
Not
concept.
closing, I think we're tightening them up, but not closing.
I take it that you'll be rather conscious of the fact that a lot of the businesses there rely on tractor trailers and not subcompact, so as you're tightening up,
Not
I'd
too
hate to
tight,
put
yeah.
people at a competitive disadvantage because we're off trying to achieve other objectives. That's-
Correct. No, the viability of the businesses adjacent to it is very important to how these designs go forward.
Okay.
And they wouldn't be finalized without consulting with them very closely.
Thank you.
Actually,
If I
the-
may add as well, the gentleman that owns that Flynn's truck business there had his document, he had an engineer work on what happens with the traffic around his own property, the needs for the curb cuts that he has, and he gave us a copy, I think at the last public hearing that we had over here last year. So we used that to inform as well what we did over here. It wasn't just out of the blue to do this, so we worked with him basically. to do it.
Thank you very much.
But the design that's currently being presented for the TIF, that is different than this, probably.
Yeah, probably. I think
Okay,
it's.
so that's really the one that we should be focusing in on, not this, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, if you're thinking of the hierarchy, the master plan kind of calls for improved capacity on Route 20 and access and turning. How that actually ends up becoming a project is what you're seeing that was presented to the MPO.
Mr. Lorian, there was a slideshow on that PowerPoint. Would it be possible to get a copy of that sent to our board so we could look at what's currently being considered?
Of course.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. And so the next one just features the Lake Street intersection, which, when we put this sketch together, matches the mitigation that was proposed, and the design that was proposed there as part of the redevelopment. And then the last two sets are South Street, and this one is South Street and Green Street and South Street. And here you can see in blue the wetlands that have been identified that at our initial pass, as part of making the plan, kind of ruled out that connection, but we can spend more time looking at that. And then finally, again, Valenti. And while this one required kind of that call out, what's basically happening is Walnut Street is being connected to Valenti, which has a new signal in the master plan, and that allows traffic on Walnut Street to access Route 20 via Valenti instead of at the unsignalized intersection.
May I ask a question? Have you had conversations with the property owner as to their willingness to participate in that cut-through road?
This one, I think we proposed it on the property lines, thinking that would be the most amenable to them, but we have not, as far as I'm aware.
No direct discussions yet.
Thank you.
And then finally, just next steps. So we have the public meeting on March 4th at 7 o'clock at the library. And then just laying out for the improvement projects, you know, if they were to go forward, you know, Grafton Street would have to complete its next phase's design, update their costs, and get funds programmed. So just kind of laying that out so people have expectations for how that works. Where at Lake Street, you know, if that ends up, that as mitigation for the development would be done after a permit's granted by Mass DOT. And like I said, South Street and Valenti, you know, they're potential projects out of this master plan, and they would actually have to go through a project need and initiation form process. And that would be the last slide for the presentation.
Thank you. I just would like to thank the representative for getting onto this, because Route 20, as you know, has been a nightmare forever. And with all the growth over the past 20 years, it's gotten worse. So at least we have a plan. We know what needs to be done. If there is development on the road, or somehow we can shake money loose, we could probably get done sections at a time. But also looking from Route 9 all the way to the Worcester line, I think was a really big help. And really appreciate you doing that, because I think the comprehensive look is really helpful. So, any other questions?
I just have one follow-up.
Sure.
I don't know if the proposed or the land sale to UPS and the quiet discussions about a new facility in Grafton and impacts that may be on Route 20, were those, to the extent they're even public, incorporated within your plans?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the master plan is available on our MassDOT Route 20 website for download.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All set?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Our next item is a meeting with Michael Hale, General Manager of Shrewsbury Light and Cable. Are you watching us on TV, Michael? Yeah. I was wondering how you timed that so perfectly.
Mr. Holland.
Good evening. Yes. Mr. Holland, for you.
Evening. God, where's my clicker?
How are you, Bob?
Thank you. Young man,
How's everything?
welcome back.
Thank you. How's everything? Good.
Jackie, come in. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's the Flores. We're ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Hale, Selco General Manager. It's been a while since I've been in before the board. Usually I'm in here asking for a cable rate increase, and usually filled with bad news rather than positive news. So I thought it was appropriate, and I asked the chair and the town manager if I could have some time to come in and talk about major initiatives on the horizon at Selco. With me here tonight are Honiton Maliver, John Laverty, Joel Maliver, and Ralph Icarino from the operations and engineering side, Jackie Pratt, our customer care manager and marketing coordinator or marketing director, and Bob Holland, the chair of the commission. And so we've labeled this presentation a blueprint for the next generation infrastructure for Selco. We just want to touch base with you and the community who are watching and share with you our major initiatives for 2020 and beyond. So I thought we'd break it into two segments. First, an overview of the electric sector and what's going on, and then we'll go into the cable sector. On the electric sector, I'd like to just touch base briefly on some legislative and regulatory issues that we've been working on, touch a little bit on some distribution improvements that we continue to make, touch briefly on the electric rates, and then as a priority, I'd like to highlight how we're preparing for the next generation of our infrastructure. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Jackie briefly, and she's going to cover some data that we get from a survey we do every 2 years.
So we've been working with Great Blue Research since 1997, and they do surveys for us anywhere from every 2 to every 5 years. It's kind of varied over the course of our history with them. And every time we do the survey, we like to ask about different touch points with our customers, whether they have high levels of satisfaction or not. And we also ask questions about where we're going, where we need to focus our energy and efforts on what we're going to do next as an organization. This year we did a little bit different than the last, well, throughout the entire history. We've always done the electric and cable surveys together. This year we broke it out and we did 2 separate surveys because we have a lot of big stuff coming up on both the electric and cable front. We wanted to take a little bit more time on each of those. So the electric surveys here, that was conducted in August and into September. And we asked, general overall satisfaction questions. And generally, our customers view us very favorably. They think that we do a good job restoring power. They think that our rates are fair. But we also asked some questions about, customer priorities as far as where we should focus our energy in terms of reliability, cost, carbon reduction. And so we have some ranked data up there. And our customers ranked it first for reliability, second for costs, third for carbon reduction, because these are kind of the 3 main areas we need to focus in. And then we asked several different characteristics and how well we represent those characteristics. So overall, our customers are very satisfied. We represent community interests, balance environmental and fiscal needs. We provide fair prices and customer satisfaction. And we have reliable service and fast outage response times. So that's moving on to the next step where Mike's going to talk about where we're going.
And just a little bit more on the survey for the first time. I think this survey, we broke it into 2 different surveys, whereas in the past, we called 400-plus customers, or the survey company that we use calls 400 customers. We called 400 and just did electric, and a different survey, we just did cable, because I think there was some confusion when people responding, well, what are you talking about, electric or cable? So in this case, we did it separately and got separate results. So back to what I had mentioned or bulleted as things that we wanted to speak about. I just want to give you a sense of where we are and what's going on in the legislative and regulatory world, especially here in Massachusetts. There clearly is a movement towards greenhouse gas reduction. There's been bills filed on both the Senate and the House side by a number of groups or senators and representatives representing interests from a variety of stakeholders. The municipal electric utilities, for which there are 41, have an organization called MEME, which is an acronym that stands for Municipal Electric Alliance of Association of Massachusetts. And they work together with people, lawyers, on addressing issues before the legislature that would impact municipalities. Last year, MEME worked with Representative Golden and Senator Goby on signed on to, not sponsoring, but advocating for the legislative initiative that was proposed by Representative Golden. We had conversations with both Senator Moore and Representative Kane here locally. Representative Kane, very helpful in giving us guidance on the process. And basically what the bill that Senator Golden filed, Bill 2863, called for municipal electric utilities reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by the year 2050. Now, since I put together this presentation over the course of the last 2 weeks, that has changed. There's been some amendments attached to the legislation, and it is now at net zero on the legislation to remove all greenhouse gas, or to get to a net zero by 2050, and gradually do it, set so much percentage by 2030, so much by 2040, and so much by 2050. So that's something that the MEME executive group has signed on to and supports the amendments that were filed on that bill, and we will work locally with our legislative delegation in support of that. And so we'll see where that goes. I don't know. My sense is that there'll be bills filed on the Senate side and other bills filed on the House side, and somewhere there'll probably be some piece of comprehensive legislation with all of the bills coming into one potential bill. It does put us in, the net zero does put us in alignment with the current administration and a number of the representatives and senators. So I think it's a move in the right direction, and we'll see where it goes from here. It could be a year or two before it all plays out. While we were doing that, we hired a very well-known energy group to assess all the municipal light departments' power portfolios in Massachusetts. And to our surprise, well, not really to our surprise, but the results were that we're vastly ahead of where the other investor-owned utilities are in terms of the non-carbon emitting energy in our respective power portfolios. And so we had our goal, again, is to be 80 to 100% greenhouse gas free by 2050. And currently Selco, as of 2020, is between 36 and 44% carbon free. It depends on how you measure carbon free. Like our solar farm at the landfill doesn't count because we sell the renewable energy certificates to help pay for the debt service to build the thing. So until those renewable energy certificates are expired or we retire them within the next 10 years, that project doesn't count towards our meeting our goal. Even though the project wouldn't have happened without us, it still doesn't count in the way that the calculations work. So that's why I put 36 to 40. If we counted it, it would be in the higher range, but we're on our way there. Just on the analysis group report, one of the findings was, unlike investor-owned utilities like National Grid, municipal utilities can enter into long-term power contracts. And one of their main findings was that MLP-specific resource choices, namely those that involve longer-term investments, it'd be like Seabrook, hydropower contracts, and specific resources that are nearly emission-free. So that's a huge benefit for us to have these contracts in place 20 to 30 years out into the future and meeting the Commonwealth's goals. The other thing that I just wanted to touch briefly with on the legislative and/or regulatory front is that 5G is the wireless infrastructure that will compete with the wired line broadband infrastructure that cable provides. And that's coming. It's not really here yet in Shrewsbury, but it's only a matter of time. And Selco hired a firm along with the communities of Braintree and Norwood, who also have broadband plants, to develop some standards and regulations. And it's in draft form right now, and we're working through that because you have to be ready. The federal regulation states that you can't deny them. Now, it's in appeals court, and we'll see where it comes out of appeals court. It's in the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. But as it's written today, you cannot prohibit them from coming into your community, and nor does Selco want to be in that position to be anti-competitive. So we have to develop a regulation that satisfies the safety concerns and aesthetic concerns for the community. So that is a work in progress. In terms of distribution improvements, I just want to touch briefly on that. In the mid-2015, 2016, we hired PLM, our primary power design consulting engineering firm, to do a master plan for the community. And in that master plan, they've developed a number of recommendations, primarily to change some of our circuits. We have two different types of circuits. I won't get into the details, but some are 5 kV and some are 13.8 kV. The goal is to convert as many as possible of the 5 kV circuits to 13.8. That's a lot of work that you've got to go out on those circuits and replace all the wire and everything on all the poles. But the benefit to it is that once you have the whole town 13.8, you can then put in switching so that when there's outages, you can't switch someone who's on a 5 kV circuit to a 13.8, but if they're all 13.8, you can switch and temporarily restore power while you make. So it's really being done to create greater resiliency and reliability. It's a ton of work. The crews are engaged in a systematic process of preventive maintenance and the distribution rebuild. So,
Mr. Chairman? Is it your plan to undertake a complete system-wide upgrade?
Our goal is to get to 13.8 system-wide, but it's probably a decade to 12 years in the making. And it will also allow us, when we do that, to retire one of our substations to save on some operational costs as well. So that's the longer-term goal on the distribution side. Touch briefly on the rates on the electric side. Again, nothing really changed here. Overall, our rates have been stable. They've been stable for almost a decade. It's largely due to the fact that natural gas prices, they're highly tied to natural gas and the price of natural gas. So our rates are stable. We have one of the lowest rates in Massachusetts. And there is some winter fluctuation that I've talked to you before about, and that's largely attributed to capacity constraints in natural gas pipelines. So when there's a high demand on the generators to produce power when it's extremely cold, there isn't enough capacity in the gas lines to feed those generation facilities, so it spikes up the price. This graph here just shows you, again, we always use the old adage that if you live on the east side of the lake, you pay $91 for the average residential bill. And if you live on the west side of the lake, that is $200. So there's a substantial benefit by being a Selco customer when it comes to rates. And the next slide really is what I wanted to talk to you about tonight, our next generation meter roadmap. This really sets the tone for where we're going. It's about a $3.5 million project. We plan to rip and replace at all the meters in the town, about 15,000 meters over the next 3-year period, with a technology called AMI. It's really just an acronym for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. But what this really provides for us is the ability to do real-time readings from the office rather than sending a meter reader out to read a meter when somebody moves or has an issue. It allows us to improve our billing efficiencies. Right now, we have the meter reader driving the entire town in court. We do 1/4 of the town per week. So each month, we have 4 billing routes that she's driving the entire street in that quarter. We could do it all at once from a desk. But the real benefit really is that it allows us to do data analytics for load management, so that as more and more people buy electric vehicles, which we think is going to happen, or put solar on their roof, each street or residential neighborhood is served by transformers. So having this infrastructure allows us to balance the load and see when somebody, because we don't want to overload the people come in with the electric vehicles, we don't really know, they start overloading transformers, it impacts. So this will allow us to monitor and get data analytics from the load as the world changes to more electrification. And lastly, on this meter infrastructure, it really sets the foundation for what might be the future of how people consume and pay for electricity. And by that I mean it has happened in other places, more so in California, but people are going to time of use rate structures. So you're paying a different price depending on when you use your electricity. And these meters allow us to put that type of rate structure in place. I'm not saying we're going to do it. I doubt that this would be done in any time in the next 5 years. But this is the foundation that would allow that to happen if that's how the industry goes, because the cost of electricity between 5 and 9 p.m. when everyone gets home, plugs in their electric vehicle, turns on their ovens, starts the laundry, does the cost spikes in the demand. So this is meant to try and smooth out and get people's behavior to change, to do certain things in different hours where the cost of energy is lower, and there'll be a portal that allows the customer to know what the cost is at different times.
Well, this kind of goes hand in hand with the 2050 initiative too on the non-carbon, because in order to meet that, you're going to have probably a smaller generating capacity overall, and in order to do that, you need to basically force feed power savings across the board, and the best way to do that is to balance it out. Take the peaks away so that you can maintain a steady rate with a smaller capacity overall to make that happen.
So that's the goal on the electric side. Other initiatives we're working on, we continue to partner with MWIC, our power supply partner, to seek long-term carbon-free contracts to meet the goal eventually of getting to net zero by 2050. The Chairman Holland has really pressed us to look into and consider battery storage as something that the community could use to, again, smooth out peaks. We continue to look at that. We will be participating in an evaluation in 2020 under an MWIC study. We also continue to seek grant opportunities for electric vehicle charging stations. We had heard that there was going to be some money from the Volkswagen settlement. It hasn't come west of 495 yet, so we're awaiting that, and we have a couple locations that we'd like to consider. Anecdotally, I think that'll be an interesting development because, you know, when you put fossil fuel in your car, the price of gasoline on Belmont Street is close to the price of gasoline on Route 9 in Shrewsbury. But when you start charging electric cars and the cost of the electricity is so vastly different, what's that gonna mean for communities where electricity is so much cheaper than in other communities? So we'll see how that plays out in the long term.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? The metering project, is that something you want to do, or you are?
We will do.
You are going to?
We're going to do it. We have selected a vendor. It's the same vendor that we currently have, Itron. We're finalizing contracts with them as we speak, and that should launch probably in the summer or the third quarter of this year. It's about a 3-year rollout.
We have a pilot this year.
Yeah, we're going to do a group with our own staff, linemen, install 300-plus homes to see how it goes, and then make a determination as to whether to bring in outside contractors or do that ourselves for the balance of the system. I think it's also worth noting that there could be some benefits to the town because Itron is the same meter that the water department uses, so there could be some efficiencies in that initiative as well.
Can I
So.
just ask one other question without getting into the weeds? Are all the meter boxes gonna have to get changed too?
The meter box?
The box that the meter goes in, right now,
Some will, but not all, fair to say. Mostly just the meter.
Okay.
But if it's loose mow, we're gonna have to do that, and that will be done, has to be done by a licensed electrician. So, and again, the other thing is just touch briefly, without going on too long on electric, is that we continue to work in creating programs with MWIC and DOER on efficiency measures and clean energy. We currently have, we'll toot it a little bit, I don't know how much longer it's gonna last, maybe a couple months, but we have a $1,200 rebate on heat pumps for those who are interested in putting in those, I call them Mitsubishi units. You have to use a platinum Mitsubishi rated installer, but you can get $1,200 rebate. $600 comes directly from Mitsubishi and $600 comes from Selco. We do home energy audits. A number of people are taking advantage of that. And on the state front, Selco was on the forefront of designing a new solar program that was implemented in 2019 for residential solar that can provide upwards of 60% of the cost of installing solar on your home if you meet certain requirements. So those are the things that we have been working on as I switch to cable.
One quick question.
Sure.
So if, when you're replacing meters, if someone's meter is loose on their house, that box, how does that get repaired? Like, who repairs it? Is that something that Selco does? Does the homeowner have to do it?
Right now, it's our intent to do it. So.
Well, originally it was going to be, we're going to contract that out to be done. We think that's why the pilot project's being done, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, to see
We want to
how
show that
much.
our own people can do it more efficiently, and yet, and much like anything else that I think our folks that are actually in the field will do a solid job that's completed. But we would do that.
I'm just thinking if you
We
add
Selco
that
will
to
do that
a
rather than
homeowner's
the
to-do
owner.
list, that's gonna really slow down your process, because it is not easy to get an electrician sometimes.
That's the way we looked
They're
at
in
it.
high
That's-
demand.
That's the way we looked at it as well. So, if we want to get it done.
Right, exactly.
So I'll shift a little bit towards cable. There's a lot going on in cable. I thought it'd be good to just focus a little bit on what's changed, what stayed the same, and where are we going as Selco to deal with what's changing. And before I do that, I'll again turn it over to Jackie. We'll touch a little bit on the cable customer service survey that was just completed in, I think, November of 19.
Yep, we just wrapped it up in November. So in addition to asking your customer satisfaction questions, as we do, we took the opportunity of having a separate cable survey to ask questions about where we need to go as an organization, where we need to focus our investments, if people are interested in purchasing fiber to the home product from us, and how they feel about us as far as the internet and cable TV packages that we're offering. So people are satisfied. They agree that we provide an overall quality internet service. They're happy with what they've got. And in looking at how likely would you be to subscribe to a fiber to the home service if it costs $5 to $10 more per month, we have a total likely response rate of over 50% that people would be likely to do that. And then we asked customers specifically, where should Selco prioritize their investment going forward? And we asked, should we prioritize broadband, video? Are they equally important, or do you just not know? And 41% said we should focus on broadband. Only 9.6% said we should focus on video. 28.5% said equally or both important. We had a fair chunk of folks, 20.5%, that said they didn't know where we should do that. In looking at our existing cable television video packages, about 75% of the customers that still have television service with us are happy with what they've got, so.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
How big is that sample size of our town?
So, we have two different surveys that were done, and I don't believe there was any overlap between the customers who received the calls. So each survey consisted of 300 completed telephone surveys using our customer contact data, so it's good phone numbers for people on the number that they want to be contacted at, and then another 100 to 200 completed online. So the percentages we've been presenting tonight are the aggregate results of those two different methodologies. So about 400 plus on each of the surveys.
So how are those chosen?
So we take ourselves out of that selection process. We provide Great Blue Research with our customer data. We tell them this group of customers has electric, this group of customers has cable, and this group of customers has both services. And when we say cable, it could be internet, telephone, cable TV, or some combination of those. They're all classified as a cable product. And Great Blue breaks down how they're going to make the contacts. In the interest of making sure that we have accurate, actionable data, they focus on making sure that the survey samples that they're using are representative of our demographics here in Shrewsbury. The data we get back, we can't tie back to any individual customers, so for us, that's what we'd like is that independent third-party analysis of the results.
So what does that mean, the demographic of Shrewsbury? What does that mean to me? Does that mean 20% are under 30 or 16% are over 50? I'm trying to get a
Yeah, so we
grasp
get
of that.
demographic data at the end of the survey. It gives us percentages exactly like that. It can include age, gender, household income, all kinds of different statistics, demographic statistics.
You can cross-reference them to the question.
You can cross-reference them. They can slice and dice the data any way we want. But generally what we have found from Great Blue is what their results show is what's also comparatively available through other, whether it's the census or whatever. So we're getting a fair representation of what our customers
Well, I'd
think
say
we do.
I'd say in the demographics too, it breaks out, it shows that, I think we've been able to show that a more youthful environment is more interested in fiber and technologies, the internet, whereas the more senior folks like myself who are analytically involved, associated with cable TV are more interested in making sure that is maintained. And so you do see those numbers.
And relative to their results, who's happy, who's not happy, is that also reflected in the experience you folks have over the phone and at the front desk here?
For the most part, I'd say that's true, Jim. They did provide data comparing us to, and they do this work for private cable operators as well as private electric industry companies. And in both sectors, our customer service overall rankings were significantly greater than that of private entities. That said, there's not a lot of people that like cable companies. There's
There's
a lot
also
of
a reason.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Yeah, but ours was, our favorability rating on the cable side was, in many cases, we're in the 80s. The private operators were in the 40% favorable, so we took that as a general. And the other thing anecdotally is, we used to only do phone surveys, but now we have to do online surveys because so many people don't have a landline anymore, so you have to
Well,
go with the
and to be fair, we are calling the number that they've provided us with, so we're calling our cell numbers if that's what they've given us. And you can actually see some satisfaction splits between the methodology that was used, whether it was a phone survey or an online survey. People who take online surveys tend to self-select. They're either really excited about you and they want to tell you about it, or they're really angry at you and they want to tell you about it. So you can see that fluctuation a little bit. As Bob mentioned, if you looked at under 30 and looked at the answers to some of the survey questions compared to the over 65s, you'd see some variation there as well. The numbers we've got here are the aggregate total big picture.
Thank you.
And so I'll get into the cable presentation. Really, what this is all about is broadband is the future. Broadband has become a utility, just like water, just like sewer, just like electric. 15 years ago, some people considered it a novelty. Today, it's something that you're actively using throughout the day. We've had customers call in an outage and say, when am I getting my internet back? And we say, well, sir or ma'am, you don't have power. And their response sometimes is, well, we don't care if we don't have power. We need our internet. So you need both to operate, but that's the significance of how big broadband has become in our daily lives. So that really is what we're basing how significant broadband has become is really where we're putting all our capital investment. I think it's also worth noting that especially over the last 3 or 4 years, cord cutting is growing exponentially, and by that I mean people are getting rid of cable television as we knew it and as we've grown up with it, and they're finding alternative means of entertainment through streaming services like Netflix, like Disney Plus, Hulu, Amazon Prime, YouTube. Or in a replacement for linear cable, you could get YouTube TV or Sling TV, which provides very much a similar cable lineup, but streamed rather than through the cable box. So the choice that people have long desired is here, and it does impact on how we make our decisions. The other important thing to mention is that 5G is coming, and it could be a potential threat for our business. If it does what it says it can do of providing gigabyte speeds to the homeowners and businesses, what I am interested in seeing, most of those wireless companies have data caps, significant data caps, and then they'll throttle your speed or start charging significantly more once you've gone beyond. So we'll see if that's going to play out in the next generation.
So, okay, are you talking about 5G is going to be a threat
Could
to
be.
our fiber broadband or to the cable?
To fiber broadband and cable, for that matter. This chart that you see is a decade-long assessment or illustration of what has happened to our cable subs. So 10 years ago in 2009, we had close to 11,800 video subscribers. When we put this data together at year-end 2019, we're down to 7,753. So we've lost 4,000 cable subscribers in a 10-year period. And that's not unique to Shrewsbury. That's what the way the industry is going. So just what hasn't changed? What hasn't changed is dramatic programming cost increases, and again, I think that's the primary reason why people are cutting the cord, because it's becoming extremely expensive. The other thing that hasn't changed is the insatiable bandwidth growth. We continue to see the demand for bandwidth increasing at about 35% compounded annual growth rate, largely attributed to streaming, gaming, and eventually it'll be driven by the so-called Internet of Things in the home, where everything will become connected over either a wired or wireless platform within your house.
Michael, may I ask you a question on
Sure.
that? As you look at your total demand for that part of what you do, clearly the school department is a big user, the town's a big user. Where does the town and school, where do they rate together as your customer?
Well, I couldn't answer that off the top of my head. I could find out for you, but really what you build the plant for is peak demand, and peak demand is not during the day. So they're somewhat insignificant.
Okay, I got you.
So
self-leveling, if you will?
Yeah.
I come home, I turn everything on.
Yeah. So we have to build it to 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. Unless it's a snow day, Jim.
Sure.
And everyone's home from school and parents are working from home. and children at home, those are killer days on the system.
So it's almost an optimization of your
Yeah, it
system.
is. It's an optimization, so.
Thank you.
The school and the town on a day-to-day basis doesn't impact what we do. So what have we done in the last 7 years or so to keep up with this bandwidth growth? Well, we've invested heavily in the head end and the physical plant to stay ahead of bandwidth demands and industry norms. We've developed a very comprehensive maintenance plan and executed that to keep the nodes balanced. And we've also hired 2 national consulting firms to evaluate our infrastructure needs. We had a study done in 2012 by Uptown Services, and we had a study recently done by CTC out of Bethesda, Maryland in 2017 into 2018. So I just want to touch a little bit on the findings of the CTC study. They took a comprehensive review of our existing cable plant, and then they did an assessment of both engineering and a financial overview of what a next-generation cable plant would look like. And they looked at 3 different options for Selco. One was to upgrade the current plant, it's referred to as a DOCSIS technology, from its current 3.0 technology to 3.1. The second was to overbuild the entire system with a fiber-to-the-home solution. And the third was a hybrid solution involving building much deeper fiber into the plant, but retaining the last mile at a DOCSIS level. I'll just touch a little bit on the findings, on the advantages and disadvantages of each solution. On the DOCSIS side, again, that would be an upgrade using the existing wires that are already out there deployed through the field. It would be a much easier transition to improve existing speeds. The legacy plant can be used. There's no need to replace the equipment that exists in every home other than update the modem, but a customer can self-install a modem. That's not a big undertaking. And in the short term, the advantage would be lower costs in the next 5 to 8 years. The disadvantages to upgrading to DOCSIS are that there would be higher operational costs than going to a fiber solution. The cable that's used in DOCSIS has a much shorter life than fiber, and you'd need to do multiple upgrades over the next 20-plus years to make which in essence makes DOCSIS solution more expensive over the long term. So again, short term, cheaper, long term, on a net present value basis, more expensive. The fiber to the home advantages, potentially you could have limitless speeds with fiber. It's much less expensive to operate over time. It's not susceptible to signal leakage. And just on that note, people who have, on occasion we get people all the time calling saying my internet or my cable is being interrupted. And it can be as simple as something as one of their neighbors on their street has lousy wiring that they might have got from a Radio Shack or something to split and add to another room. That creates signal issues that impact everybody in and around that area. So we have to go out there in trouble. So having fiber would eliminate a lot of those issues. And fiber allows you to have symmetrical upload and download speeds, and that you can't get under the DOCSIS solution. And by that, what I mean is people who upload files, it takes a lot longer than to download a movie from Netflix. Uploading with fiber, it would be symmetrical, so it could be done both. The disadvantages to fiber, this is key, and this is why we haven't started yet. The existing video plant is not compatible with fiber. So in order to rip and replace with fiber, we also have to, in many cases, rip and replace the cable boxes in the home. And that would be, probably a $5 million capital investment, plus all the labor to go out and install them all. We think that eventually the cable boxes will go by the wayside and everything will be streamed. So we're very reluctant to make that capital investment in ripping and replacing something that is going to become antiquated over the next 5 years.
Mike, when you say video plant, I mean, honestly, I was thinking it was the head end. It's not.
No, it's in the houses.
So, I mean, can you just
So
briefly, what is the video plant?
The current cable boxes that you have in your house will not operate over fiber.
But that, okay, so I mean, that is what that's what's not compatible. I mean, there's no other non-compatible components.
Well,
in
the
this.
head end is different, but it's less significant of an investment than ripping and it's just the labor of it and going to every house that has a cable system.
Thank you.
So,
But I have a card, don't I? I don't have a cable box. I have this card that slides in the back of, like, does it impact the card?
I can't answer that, Joelle, can you?
Yes.
So the card is bad?
Yeah, you will need a new car, you will need something totally different. So the existing cable box that you're using today, which I'm assuming is a TiVo,
Right.
won't work.
It wouldn't work? Okay, I'm with you.
So that's a big
So there's a
issue
cost
for
to
us.
the, I'm sorry, another question. So there's a cost basically to the homeowner, because I own that TiVo box or and then the card comes from Selco,
If you wanted fiber, yes.
if I wanted fiber. Gotcha, okay.
So on fiber, you have to overbuild the entire system. That requires relining the entire physical plant on every street, out above ground, underground, with new wires that are all fiber. It's very challenging to deploy fiber in multifamily units. There's not conduits usually. Some of them are direct buried, and then getting the fiber into each unit isn't always easy. We have fiber to the home technology in the Lakeway Commons. We use that as a beta, but we were able from the beginning to work with the architects and the apartment owners on having them install conduits for us to pull the fiber into, and it went seamlessly. So on a new construction, it's easy. On a retro, it's a headache. And on fiber, it's a much higher upfront capital cost, significantly higher at the beginning. So what have we done? We've studied the thing to death, and the Selco staff recommended and the commission voted in October to pursue the fiber to the home model at an estimated cost of approximately $30 million. The reason behind the decision, it presents itself the best net present value calculation over the long-term life cycle of the plant. It is a superior technology. It is the best solution for those who want to work from home, or we see a shift from more and more professionals working from home as the commute to Boston takes 2.5 hours in the morning and at night. This would provide the best solution for those work from home professionals during the day. It also can be considered an economic development tool for the town. Many businesses, that's on their checklist when they decide to locate to a certain area. What is the broadband infrastructure like? And it also provides, facilitates smart city initiatives that the town manager and I have discussed, not in great detail, but something that he's very interested in for the future of the town. This would provide the foundation for that to occur. So since that November or October decision, we've hired a firm to design a fiber to the home plant and develop an RFP for us to go out and build the initial 1/3 of the community. We hope to have construction starting this summer or fall of 2020. We will seek authorization to borrow $12 to $15 million for the capital costs at the May 2020 annual town meeting. The balance we will use in cash that we have been putting aside for this project. this kind of shows you where our intended areas are to start. Our head end is on North Consigamond Avenue, Parker Road, where the SPAC studio is. And we're gonna start there and move north over towards Route 70 and up and around, back down to Route 9 in our first phase. That said, we've already done some node building ourselves. Our own crews have built a node in the center of town. We've built a node down at Lake Street near the intersection of Route 20, and we're in the process of building a node in and around Flynn's truck stop. We've built a lot of fiber as well in the commercial quarters with our own staff.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question, Michael? Given historically low interest rates, why have you chosen, or what's the thinking behind your thinking as to your split between borrowed money and cash?
We haven't, well, I think there's some risk too, Jim, in that what if 5G takes over the world and we borrowed all this money and there's no, and we're paying for something 20 years out that nobody, so to me it was more of a risk assessment. We had the cash on hand and to do it in somewhat of a 50-50 type split.
Is your bond rating independent but supported by the towns, or are they the same?
Well, we can do one of two ways. We can borrow through MWIC, has legislative authority to borrow through them, but we can also use the town's bond rating and go through the town. It has to be backed up with a revenue source, guaranteed revenue source. So, to answer your question, we haven't finalized that.
I was just wondering, thank you.
But I think it's important to realize it doesn't add to the tax rate or anything. We're just using the bond rating to get the money which Selco pays those monies for the people viewing at home.
Who gets you a better rate, the town or MWIC?
Town, by far. Well, now, with AAA. I don't know if you could get a better rate than what you have. So, again, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges, because this is not a project of any great ease. There are a lot of issues. The video solution we need to resolve. We need to resolve issues with fiber to the home connections to each home, especially for those who are going to keep video. They still might bring fiber to the home and have their broadband on fiber, but keep their video on the HFC plant. It's kind of crazy to maintain two plants, but until we have a solution, we might have to do it that way. There's issues with determining the best means for, half of our town is underground. So in some cases, the conduit there isn't enough girth in the conduit to run both fiber and keep the existing HFC wire in the same conduit. So that's going to present some challenges as to how we do that, and some engineering review. We need to develop a strategy for meeting the bandwidth challenges with the existing plant while the fiber to the home build-out is completed. And we need to take a deep dive into how we're going to make this work in multifamily dwellings, especially those who are much older than. It shouldn't be a problem in places like Madison Place and some of the other new developments, but the older ones will be more of a challenge for us. So in summary, this initiative is likely to take 3 to 5 years. We ask for some patience. We'll try and keep everyone. Jackie, I think, does a great job at keeping people abreast of what's going on. There's likely to be some hiccups on this journey. We ask for patience, but we really believe that we are building a foundation to keep Shrewsbury a highly desirable community to live and work. And really what this is all about is a roadmap. We call it a roadmap for sustained excellence. So that's kind of the summary. It's a big project, the largest capital investment I can think that Selco has undertaken, maybe at $30 million, at one time.
Just a quick question, Michael, on the financing. So the initial recourse is future payments from customers or payment streams. That's to secure the loan. Are they any possibility, for the reason you talked about with the uncertainty around 5G, that lenders would go any deeper than that? Or a guarantor, or would they look just solely to Selco?
We haven't had those discussions yet with any of the bond rating agencies or anything like that, but I know that in other parts of the country, they haven't had those issues.
Okay, they
so-
stopped there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I had a question. So if Selco goes through and puts in the fiber to the home, is there a possibility that another competitor could come in and put in 5G and then override the whole fiber to the home?
They're two different technology. One rests on the pole
Right.
and is wireless to the home. The other, there's another competitor who come in and put another strand of fiber on every pole and compete against Selco. There's no stopping competition.
Right, but that sounds really hard, and it doesn't sound as hard to put a smart meter on a pole. Am I just looking at it too simply?
Well, no, but there's some deficiencies in 5G, and that you need to have almost perfect line of sight in order to get a good signal, and Shrewsbury's topography is very undulating, and trees and things in the way, so until, if you were in Iowa in a cornfield, it would work perfectly, but there's barriers to the signal.
So you're saying that fiber to the home is more reliable?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Much more.
It's a lot to it.
I can't say that it'll be that way in 15 years. I don't want to mislead you.
You don't
That's
have a
why there's
crystal ball?
risk.
Okay.
There's risk in this project.
Yeah.
Mr. Scott.
I just want to say a couple things. Thank you, Mr. Hale, for the presentation. I certainly agree with your slides, a few back, and then your final slide that's up here. I think this is a huge competitive advantage to continue to leverage this unique relationship and having Selco as part of being a municipal utility and offering these services to our residents, even beyond just what some electric does. And with you all having cable and internet, it provides us a huge advantage. You cited smart city initiatives, and part of that is the Internet of Things in the public domain, and that's something that we cannot afford to consider in every decision that we make in the future, because it will be more reliable. Residents will expect us to be more responsive as their lives continue to evolve, and the private sector is always out ahead of us as far as how they communicate with their customers, and that then drags municipal governments and state governments along. So we will be forced in this direction, and it's just a unique situation for us to be able to partner with someone that's down the hall and not have to beg Verizon or some other company to come in and build in our community. And along with that, outside of the public domain, I couldn't agree more that, keeping Shrewsbury vibrant, one of the things that we'll need to do is make sure that as, flexible work environments continue to become the norm, both to reduce emissions and provide for quality of life issues, et cetera, that if you don't have a location where you can, work from your home, it's going to be less desirable, and people will begin and already are taking that into their decision-making process. So I look forward to partnering with Selco, in the Internet of Things in the public domain and every other aspect that we could leverage from this initiative to the benefit of the residents from a town business standpoint. So thank you.
One thing you didn't mention, what's the impact going to be on rates on, I know it might be it's certainly too early to tell, but
It was part of our pro forma analysis that CTC did, Mr. Chairman, and it could be anything from no impact to upwards of $5 or $10 per month per sub, depending on how it comes in its total. But it would still be at, 50, we're currently at $54. If it went to 59 or 64, we'd still be below the average, and we'd have fiber. We'd be below the average for DOCSIS, and we'd have a superior product.
He's talking about this for a long time.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah, we've been talking about this for over 5 years.
Just a little.
Could you, what's the experience been with the pilot at Lakeway or anywhere else you're piloting with fiber?
I think it's fair to say that we've had very little to, if any, issues at Lakeway, so it's been a great experience.
We've also been able to provide some commercial properties, right, for the.
All commercial.
All the new
commercial.
health facilities have been brought. One of the attractions that brought them into the town was that we, as a self-contained entity, were able to go and string the fiber to provide the services that they needed, so it helped us already.
Now granted, it's a much smaller, it's a pilot, but have you done any survey or interactions with the customers?
We haven't specific to Lakeway, no. I'm sure some of those customers were in the overall survey, but
We can do that now.
we could, yep.
And what are some other advanced municipal light plants doing?
Well, Concord is overbuilding fiber to their residents, but they do it in Westfield is doing it, Westfield Gas and Electric, Chicopee, South Hadley. So a number of them in the Western Mass are doing it, but they're taking an approach because there are already providers in their territories. They're taking what's referred to as a fiberhood approach, where they'll send out a survey, and if they get a 70% penetration rate in a given neighborhood, they'll build it. But if they don't, they'll go on to another neighborhood. So they're kind of building it incrementally based on demand. We don't have that luxury. We have to do it for all.
What's the community that's doing away with video completely?
Braintree Electric and Broadband exited the video business at the end of the calendar year 2019. They're staying in the internet business, but they're bleeding red on the video side, so they exited that business. And that's, most operators do lose money on the video side, and so the shift to streaming can be a win-win proposition over the long term.
So I'm just curious, in Braintree, for instance, that the municipal went out, is there an alternate source of cable?
Two.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Thank you. That was a pretty comprehensive presentation.
Thank you very much.
That was a culmination.
But it's one of those things we haven't seen yet.
Culmination of a lot of years of discussion and work.
Yeah.
And we ended up where pretty much we thought it was going to be. We seemed to be heading where you thought we were going to be heading, so.
Yep.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Is the Cahill here?
Yeah, he's just
Bernie's right there. Where is he?
in the hall.
Oh.
Okay. I owe you.
Is it the old chair?
Take a quick break.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
We take a break?
Same as.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Did we call a, are we in recess?
I wasn't sure.
Is it recess?
I didn't hear the gavel bang, but.
Thank you. I printed this whole thing out by mistake in my house.
What am I pressing to move on? Just right.
You ever seen anyone do something?
Hey, Jim, how are you?
What's that?
Is that against your policies?
No,
Probably. I couldn't wait. Looks like we're in for another hour.
You all set? Ready? Mr. Cahill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bernie Cahill. I'm the town planner. Thank you to the board for having me here again tonight. Let me get this out. So tonight, if you recall, last October, I came into you presenting an overview of our efforts to go forward with creating a town center zoning district. As you can see here on our schedule for our process, we are at number 5, which is to come back to all of you to present our findings since our last meeting in October. Tonight, I'm going to try to keep it brief. I know it's getting late. At our last meeting, we discussed the kind of the big picture goals for what it is we're trying to achieve in the town center. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about where we've been since that meeting, where we are now today, and where we're going to go from here. Can I ask actually how many people, put all of you on the spot, went to the forums, either of the forums? I know. Yeah, so most of you. That's great. All right, so just about everyone. So I'll recap relatively quickly these first parts, but I think it is important to recap this initial few slides. So the vision that we're looking at for the town center, we had laid this out last October, and I explained to you, we kind of looked at kind of those quintessential towns in New England and said, this is kind of what we have in mind for the town center, right? And I took 4 New England states, looked at 4 quintessential New England town villages in those states, and put them on a nice picture slide here. We talked then at the time briefly about some of the characteristics that each of these so-called quintessential towns share in common. They're kind of village characteristics, if you will, in terms of like no front yard setbacks, mix of uses, top of shop housing, smaller lots, variety of uses, and so on. Also at the time, we talked about that there are some of these aspects in the town center today that Shrewsbury does have, as you can see in these pictures. And we also talked about where it does not have some of these characteristics today. So the origin story for where we are and why this came about, that the town planning department is working on this as a goal. So in 2016, the master plan stated for the town center goals that it was looking for the town to pursue a town center that has a compact style of infill and new development, that it's pedestrian friendly and can serve as a neighborhood gathering place, and also for managing, to provide recommendations for new ways to manage parking, to have building design guidelines and streetscape improvement guidelines. So we worked from there, from those established goals in the master plan. 2018 and into 2019, we contracted a consultant. It happened to be Horsley Witten, who's also working on the RFP for the Beale School. And it was the same person, Nate Kelly, who was working on it with us. And in this town center, we did surveys. We had public hearings as well, public meetings, I should say, public forums, to help refine those town center goals by soliciting feedback from town members, stakeholders, and so on. So we kind of started to distill those goals down to establishing Shrewsbury as a vibrant, pedestrian-oriented town center that will have evening and daytime activity, create a more robust cultural and economic center in Shrewsbury, and to promote that continued traditional New England aesthetic and character. And within that town center as well, there were, at the end of that report, there were recommendations for achieving some of these goals, such as introducing design standards and guidelines for buildings, lighting and signage, flexible parking standards, a more predictable permitting process, and allowing for a greater variety of uses. So in the fall, harking back to the outline that I showed you earlier, we took those recommendations in the outline that Horsley Witten had provided to us in their report, and what we started to do is to flesh it out a little bit. And we started to come out with more than just an outline, but we started to put an actual zoning draft. But once we got to that point, we said, well, let's take a closer look at it and see if we can't break this down into what are the actual elements that we're talking about here of changing, what are the kind of the distinct characteristics, and what are the distinct parts of the zoning that are going to be in this town center district. So what we did is we came up with 5 distinct elements for the downtown, or should I say we broke them down into 5 distinct elements, And that was kind of the basis for our public forums, as since most of you attended, for anyone at home or in the audience who wasn't there, is what we did is, as you can see on the screen here, is we created what are stations of each of these elements. So we had a zoning boundary station, for example, we had an architectural and lighting station, we had a parking station, and so on. And what we did is we allowed for open conversation to ensue. We had drop boxes for comments at each of these stations so we could collect that feedback from the forum, right? Because we had those elements in place, we didn't have the precise language of the zoning at the time, but we wanted to get that initial feedback. What are people thinking, and can they offer us any fresh and new ideas? And we did get some out of that, which was great, because I was pleasantly surprised at that, and also at the overwhelming amount of support that came out of these forums. So we had those forums in November, December of last year. I'm not going to go through each of these parts of it, but as you can see up here, these are the individual elements. Parking station, we had a uses station for existing uses, and then we threw in a few ideas that we were thinking of that we wrote down ourselves, bounce them off of people. And some people put in their own ideas, including, well, cafe and coffee shops was a big one. What I did here is we had our intern in the fall last year take all of the feedback we got from each of these stations, write it all down, and then what I did is I combined them all. So the ones that we heard the most often, or if we had repetitive answers for it, like everyone seemed to love dark sky lighting, and period street lighting was a big fan favorite. Architecture preferences were all over the place, but most of the time it was around kind of that Victorian, federal, colonial styles, which is not really too big of a surprise being in New England. Things like hanging signs and stuff. There was also support for things not to allow, especially things like cell towers, not antennas per se, but actually just the large three-dimensional towers, and prohibiting marijuana sales in the town center. That was kind of big for people. So they were for not allowing things in some cases. So again, as you can see here, then we also had dimension stations. This is for things like wider sidewalks, which got a lot of feedback from that. And I'm happy to share with the board or anyone the entire, if you want to look through the comments, some of them are quite colorful, that we received from these public forums. So what did we do then? Well, we took, again, what we'd already written up as an outline, and we took those elements and we took that feedback, and working from that, from all the feedback we got, we started to actually, and this is where we are now, drafting the town center bylaws themselves. And the way we see this unfolding is there'll probably be 3, maybe 4 articles. One of them will deal with the uses, definitions, and the use table, as you'd imagine, because when you change one, of course, you're going to trigger the other, and that sends up a ripple effect through the rest of the zoning. And then we envision really the bulk of it's going to be in a separate new subsection of the zoning. In this case, our next letter is U, so it'll be section U. We're almost out of letters, so we've got to keep it tight. So anyways, tonight what I've done is, instead of, because it would take all night to go through, not all night, it would take more time than we have this evening to go through the entire draft of the zoning at this time. Besides, we're going to do a public, you're going to get your public hearing on that anyways in April after the board started, per usual with any zoning article we do, and also to the finance committee as well. So that's standard procedure. So tonight what I'm going to show you is kind of, I pulled apart 6 elements, in this case, of the new town zoning district. And what you're going to see here tonight is actual excerpts of the language. So this is the language that it is as written right now, that is going to be proposed, and the board's going to start looking at, the planning board that is. So that's going to be town center zoning district boundaries, some of the unique uses we're proposing, lighting and signage standards, architecture, frontage and landscaping requirements, and parking standards and requirements. So getting right into it, at the moment, based on our feedback that we received, own internal discussions in the planning department, and I don't know if you can see that too well from where you're sitting, but you do have the handouts in front of you. The red dotted line is what's being proposed as what would be replace the limited business zoning district, and would be the new town center district. You can see it going eastwards along Main Street, and everything pretty much to the west. What we've done is just adjust it so the zoning line goes along property lines instead of through properties. Right now it goes through almost every property, it goes right through the center of it. So if you're in it, for the most part, you're gonna be entirely in it now. There are a couple, and we've done some site visits and stuff, that are single-family houses that clearly don't quite belong in it, in the new town center district, so we've taken that out. So the next one is the allowable uses. So these are some uses, and the reason I'm pulling these out as excerpts is because they kind of stand out from what the usual business has been for uses, so some of the newer ideas. A vertical mix of uses, of course, probably the biggest one. Up to 8 vertical mixed uses, up to 8 residential units would be by site plan approval only, and then anything over 8 would be site plan special permit. We've added uses such as microbreweries and nanobreweries. That doesn't exist at all in town right now. And we would include this as a by right site plan approval use for a nanobrewery, and microbreweries, because of their larger capacity, probably a special permit as well. That's kind of where we're going with that at the moment. And then smaller scale hotels is something we'd be looking at for the downtown, something that would really complement the neighborhoods and what we are kind of going for there. So the next one is lighting and signage standards. I'm not gonna hit up each of these and talk through each one of these, but prohibited signage, just the basics, is kind of what we see now along kind of the Route 9s and the Route 20s of the world, not just in Shrewsbury, in a lot of places, are kind of those big cabinet can signs, lots of plastic, lots of interior lighting. What we're looking for is more of that traditional hanging signs or blade signs. As you can see, they tend to stick off the wall. And to be externally illuminated. Light poles, again, to react to everyone's preference, was that they definitely would need to be decorative, and they'd need to be period lighting, reflecting kind of what we already have kind of around the town common and in other parts of town. We do have some of that already, but if any new development were to come in, they'd have to make sure that that's reflective of what's already there. So moving right along, it's also probably worth noting, you'll see some rendering some graphics in some of these pictures. These are actually proposed in the zoning. I think sometimes a pictures can speak 1,000 words, and this would help the board and the public and developers to understand what it is we're going for by having visual cues and pointing out what we're talking about. So, I mean, and this is found in some of our overlay districts anyways, in terms of building forms, so places with really large and long facades over 40 feet, right? They have to show how that 40 feet's broken up, so you don't have this undivided wall just stretching down the street forever. How's it gonna be articulated, right? And certain building materials, we're looking at the moment, the proposal is that vinyl siding will be prohibited, but pretty much everything else would be allowed. Looking at much more natural materials. And I'll let you look through that graphic on your own, but there are lots of nice pointed out features in there. Things like large windows on the bottom, setback entranceways and so on, to add some really great features to it. So this is part 2 of design standards. Roof line form is very important. Anyone who's seen large commercial areas know that a blank roof line says warehouse to most people. We want that broken up. We're looking at things like dormers and so on. And building massing, again, preferably would have smaller buildings, even if they're tight together. Lots of smaller separate buildings than one long mass going up and down the street. So property frontage and landscaping, again, we're using a graphic. The one on the left wouldn't be using, but the one on the right, that graphic is included at the moment. Sidewalk widths, we have language in there that will, I'm sure some of you are thinking Mass DOT, Maple Ave, and we get that. We actually have worked with Horsley Witten. We actually reached out to Nate because he's had a lot of experience with this. Nate Kelly from Horsley Witten, and he helped us with some language that will fit working with Mass DOT and the town and property owners. So, and it's been used in other towns prior to what we're proposing here. So it's actually been road tested, if you will, so to speak, and it's worked in other places. So we have that language and you'll be seeing that. But the idea is that would have 8-foot wide minimum widths where possible, and 10-foot where even more possible. So minimum of 8, and when we can get it up to 10 or more, great. Front setbacks. Oh, let me say one thing about landscape buffers. So we do have the idea that if you have the builder, the owner, I should say, lot owners would be responsible for maintaining and keeping their landscaping in front of them. And we have language to this sense that they would have to do some sort of agreement with them, some sort of maintenance agreement, that they're gonna have to put in decorative chairs, decorative trees, and so on. Getting to setbacks, and I didn't wanna mention this to the very end, but I should probably just mention it now. It's probably a good time to say is, and I know it's next on your agenda, is for the Beale School, the old Beale School, what we've really tried to do as well is to make sure things like setbacks and different restrictions and everything are going to complement whatever is going to go into that Beal RFP and whatever we anticipate coming there. So what we're trying to do really here is to kind of provide a framework for that growth. So whatever that proposals come in, if we get 3, 4, or 5 proposals from developers, they're going to kind of be operating within the framework and within this overall vision for town center. So it's not going to really restrict them. If anything, we actually think the opposite's going to happen. If this passes at town hall, we really think this would be really good for the Beal, the reuse of the old Beal school if this were to pass, because again, this is going to provide protections for the towns in things like we just went over, things like architecture, design, movement of pedestrians, movement of bicycles. And to that end, so what we did with setbacks is we said, okay, what we're really looking for in the most cases is going to be a 10-foot setback, but given that there are certain circumstances, including the Beal School, where they might want to do more than 10 feet setback, that would be allowed by special permits. So the board knows, okay, we have this is our ideal, but in certain circumstances that might not always work, and we want to make sure what comes in is especially for the Beal, looking out for them. If someone says, hey, we want to reuse this building and make this beautiful garden in front and so on and so forth, but we'll be out of compliance, this way they wouldn't have to be out of compliance. They could apply for that special permit. And if it's already gone through the RFP process and approval, the board's going to look at it pretty favorably. So anyhow, moving right along, the parking standards, and I think I had mentioned this several times, including last year, parking ideally would be to the rear of the buildings, in coordination with neighbors through signed agreements preferably, and a reduction in the curb cuts, so we have fewer curb cuts along Maple and Main. One thing is we would allow under this current language, parking on the side of a building up to just the front facade, but no further. And on the right-hand side, here's another graphic that will be included, is they'd be required to put in a decorative barrier in to kind of break up. So you break up the cars from the sidewalk, but you would keep that pedestrian passageway continuous as you see it and as you walk. So you're going to experience nothing but trees, decorative barriers, and so on. Well, they call it decorative barriers, but we're talking about like walls, fences, and so on. Lots of greenery. So some questions for you to consider tonight, and we don't have to figure these all out at this moment. I know you have still more on your agenda. So just to get your general feedback about thoughts about the proposed uses, levels of town review for each use, the proposed boundary of the town center district, requirements in the design standards, the clarity of signage and lighting standards, and especially things like allowing 2.5 stories by right, site plan approval or review, and 3 stories by special permit. Now, I know this is going to probably be easier to respond to once you have the complete language, which you will get in just a few weeks prior to the board receiving it for their next meeting on March 5th. Kristen Last and I discussed this in some depth, and given the size, if you will, the scope of what we're trying to propose, what we've decided to do on March 5th at the next planning board meeting is to kind of do like a working session, a public meeting prior to the public hearing to walk through that zoning language from A to Z. Get familiar with the public, so it'll be on TV, it'll be seen by the board, and then really sink in our teeth into it at the April meeting when it turns into a public hearing. So you would get that pretty much the same time it goes out for the presses for the board, the planning board, if you will. So you can ask these questions, obviously ask questions tonight, but I don't want you to feel obliged to feel like we have to resolve every issue this evening. As always, I always finish with this, a note regarding planning and zoning. Right, zoning sets the parameters or the framework for what can be built, what becomes possible, right? But we don't make it happen. The town are not developers. We can try to encourage it to happen and so on and so forth. It would impact new development in town, right? But it would not force existing owners to change what they're doing at the moment. Certainly Dunkin' Donuts does not have to tear itself down tomorrow just to comply. It could continue being a Dunkin' Donuts just as it is, no problem. But what it does do is for existing and future landowners, it provides new opportunities, new possibilities for what they can do with their property. And I think someone spoke really well about it at the second public forum we had and just said, look, this is something that we're laying the foundations for the future for our kids, our grandkids. Hopefully we'll see it in our time, but it may or may not happen. But this is the starting point, and this is where we need to begin before we can even think about how to incentivize it to move forward. These are some of the towns that have done center village districts. There are plenty more. I couldn't get them all on one page. Next steps, I told you we'd talk about next steps. So our next steps are, well, actually, I have to meet with one more set of stakeholders. I did meet with the Shrewsbury Development Corporation and Historic District Commission. We got snowed out last Thursday with the Town Center Association. I'll be meeting with them this Thursday. So we're gonna go into drafting the second round of drafting the bylaws now that we've talked to all the stakeholders, including yourselves. And from there, we kind of kick off the regular town meeting season, and we'll go into our usual public hearings from there on out. You know how to reach me. So I will leave it to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Questions, comments? Anyone? No?
Well, just one if I could. Bernie, given that we're talking about the center of town, for the most part, parcels are rather narrow, they're not the deepest parcels unless you're the archdiocese that you're proposed to include in there. That's a nice big parcel as I read it. I would encourage you to look at a method of approvals that is almost a checklist, that if someone gives up 10 feet for sidewalks, it's a lot of land given where you're talking about. That if they give up that 10 feet, perhaps they get a bracketed waiver on parking. Because a parcel is only so big.
Right.
Okay, so if there's an opportunity cost to every single use that you choose, if you're giving up 10 feet times, I'm just gonna say 100-foot frontage area, as opposed to 5 feet, that's obviously a good chunk of change, simple math. So as someone achieves one of the desired outcomes, I would hope that there's a way to also provide a desired reward, if you will, not just another method of approvals to go through, whether it be a special permit or something else. I give you credit for the one that you referenced on the special permit to allow someone to get a greater level of flexibility. In terms of this, though, I'm looking for almost if you're doing a variety of things that we're asking you to do, but it's impacting your developable land, then we're in zoning recognizing that, and therefore giving you credit for it.
No, you make a really good point, so I've made a note of it, and,
Just give that some thought,
yeah, we
please.
definitely will.
Thank you.
And that's a good idea.
Just one, I guess, I don't know if it's a question or comment, but the Beal site.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like depending on what proposal was brought forward, that 4 stories, particularly if there was residential on, say, the top 2, would seem like it might work on that site. But this isn't allowing for it. I'm not saying we have to allow it, but do you give any consideration to that?
Not to 4 stories on the Beal site. I think the highest we're going up to now is 35 feet, 3 stories.
Right.
Which would be a flat roof. Which would fit with the other flat roofs towards the intersection.
Right.
We can give it some thought and see how it might fit. I don't know if that's being considered by the reuse committee. I mean, I will say, and I think.
I don't think we ever talked about it, to be honest with you.
No, we haven't. But I think what's advantageous about why this happening now at the same time as the Beal reuse RFP going out is precisely because of this. I mean, town meeting will actually be after the RFP is intended to go out. But for the moment, for the next couple months, they are going to be happening at the same time, concurrently. So if something were to come up in the meetings for RFPs for Beal School, and we thought, hey, we really need to make sure that this is allowed, we can certainly tweak these bylaws to make it work. I don't think that needs to be written off immediately, but I would say let's see what comes out of these discussions over the RFP, and then we can modify these as we see, whichever direction we see it going in.
And if it did seem like it was a good idea, we could do it through some kind of a special permit or something, but not as a matter of right, but just think about it.
Yeah, we'd have to look at, and would have to speak to the building inspector too about how she calculates height and so on. So there are a few things that get involved, but
Right.
certainly we can look at
Right.
what we would do if we needed to do that for the Beal site and what kind of oversight would be involved.
Just seems like now's the time to think of it, so.
No, it's a great time to think of it, so it's a good
Thank
point
you
as
very much.
well.
Anyone else? Ms. Les?
I'll just add, so, in conclusion, we would just be asking for the Board of Selectmen to allow for a series of warrant articles to be placed on the town meeting warrant related to zoning changes to afford a town center zoning district. And I think you have a letter in your packet related to that.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We've got the establishment of the BL RFP Selection Committee. I think that's going to be relatively quick. Ms. Lassie, you want to take us through that?
Sure, so just to give the board an update and to give the public an overview, the Board of Selectmen established what was called a Beal Reuse Committee that explored potential uses for the Beal site at 1 through 7 Maple Avenue. Concurrently with that, and as Mr. Cahill explained, in 2018 into 2019, we were afforded a grant from Mass Development to study the Beal site specifically in the town center in general about how the public views that area and how they'd like to see that area enhanced in the future. And that report was issued in 2019 and is available on the town center website and the Beal Reuse website. Out of that, we then applied to Mass Development for a grant to help us prepare a request for proposal to dispose of the Beal site. And we were awarded that grant from Mass Development and working concurrently with Horsley Witten Group and several other consultants to develop that. So the Board of Selectmen and the Beal Reuse Committee met several weeks ago to kick off that request for proposal process. It was a joint meeting, I think, very well attended and very well received. So we're now at a process where the consultant has received our feedback and is going off to prepare that request for proposal draft. And their recommendation is that we create a committee to review the draft before it's issued to developers for their perusal and response, as well as the committee would be required to review the proposals that come in, anticipated late August, early September, to vet those based upon the qualifications that are in the request for proposal, and then bring either one or more finalists to the Board of Selectmen for their ultimate decision of who would be chosen as the developer for the Beal property. So in working with our consultant, the planning staff, and Mr. DiPaolo, I've prepared a draft charge for what would be a Beal RFP committee. We've discussed that potentially the Beal Reuse Committee could be transitioned to a Beal RFP committee because they have the most knowledge, or most of the existing members have the most knowledge about what is going on that site. They've been very well informed of the studies and the projects we've been working on. So in your packet, you do have a draft charge in front of you, transferring that. Some of the committee's work would be to review existing building plans that have been done, but then building off of that, attending some of the meetings related to drafting the RFP and finalizing that RFP, reading through and deliberating on bids that come in after the RFP is due, selecting applicants to be interviewed and attending those interviews, and then, again, like I said before, recommending one or more finalists to come before the Board of Selectmen for their final decision. We've also been talking about timing of how we'd like to go about a town meeting to dispose of the property, so we believe that we'll be requesting an article for the May town meeting for that process as well. So if there's anything else I can add, I'm happy to do so.
So essentially, what we're suggesting is that the board amend the charge of the Beal Reuse Committee to now include doing the selection process. In anticipation that the board might consider that, I polled the members of the Reuse Committee to make sure that they were available and wanted to do it. There's no sense in appointing the committee if they don't want to do it. All but one person said that they're interested, and one of them, another commission member could take their place. So it seems to make sense, but we'll get input from the board, and if you agree, ask for concurrence tonight so that you can start their work.
Mr. Chairman, I think the current group has proven its ability to work together and with other interested parties, and it's done a great job to date. And I would, when appropriate, offer the motion to move forward with Kristen's amended proposal and to approve it this evening.
What do you want to second it for purpose of discussion?
I definitely do want to second it, but I also would like to just say that I think for consistency, that it makes sense to move ahead instead of trying to put out a call for residents with specific qualifications. Let's just go forward with the people that have been working on this from the beginning. They're definitely interested. I know I've spoken to a couple of the members that have said to me that they would love to be a part of this process and see it through to the finish line, and so I'm definitely supportive of doing this.
Anyone else? Okay, then we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, so voted. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next item, Mr. Mizikar.
Good evening. Welcome to the main event. Appreciate everyone's patience tonight. Certainly still another few important topics to get through. For me, it's the presentation of the first draft of the fiscal 2021 budget. I look to provide the board with a couple summary and introductory remarks, an overview of the financial position of the town, along with a discussion of revenues and expenditures, and finally dive down into some of the initial recommendations for the operating budgets, at least at this point, and review the balance of the timeline for the annual town, leading up to the annual town meeting. I know everyone's laughing because I can't get this to work. So in summary, to start with, just a couple introductory comments. We're really fortunate this year, both from an internal budget development process with all the departments, and we look forward to also rolling out by early next week our new budgeting tool, which is ClearGov. And ClearGov will enable residents to be able to take a deeper dive into our budget proposal than ever before, in a completely online, cloud-based electronic format. So we're excited to roll that out. It's been very instrumental in easing the budget process internally, and we found a lot of efficiencies using it. And I have to thank the Community Compact grant that we've received that provided this to us at no cost for the first 2 years of implementation. It's about a $28,000 annual cost, so that's significant savings to both the town and the school as we work through this. I'll provide some other highlights relative to our debt service schedule as we move into the next few fiscal years, and more in a minute on our overall financial position. This budget process has been a little more challenging than I think we anticipated going into it. I'll present, I think, the budget in a couple new contexts this year, and I'd like to talk a little bit about recurring unrestricted revenues and restricted revenues as things played out this year. That's really become part of our conversations internally. I'll talk a little bit about outsourced activities. The town has relied upon third-party contractors as part of our business model. And while I don't see that coming to a complete end in the near future, I do think it's important that we see an escalating trend in the cost of those contractors that may start to rival or even outpace the cost of us providing those services internally, even when we consider the longer-term costs associated with other post-employment benefits and retirement. As one example, a simple mowing contract for all of our cemeteries tripled on our last renewal a couple of years ago. That's providing us with a current budgeting challenge. And, other service-based or fieldwork contracts like tree removal services, there's a lot of pressure from the existing vendor that their bid 3 years ago doesn't allow them to continue to break even, let alone make a profit in the work that they do for the town. So it's a trend that we need to follow and continue in the future. With regards to capital investments, this is a confirmed trend. We certainly have a long list of needs. We have a lot of infrastructure within the community, and we're starting to see projects come on the maintenance side of things, like roof replacement on some of our aging buildings or other significant roadway improvements that really in and of themselves are 50% or greater of our annual capital investments. So we are starting to transition our model where we will introduce, hopefully in the next few years, some borrowing-based initiatives to manage our annual capital plan. I don't see any other way to be able to finance these challenges for us coming forward. I'd just like to take the opportunity at this point to really thank David Snowden for all of his work on this budget. He certainly has logged more hours than anyone else. And then the rest of the team in our office that have picked up a lot of loose ends as we struggled to bring a balanced budget forward, which I am presenting to you this evening. The overall financial position of the town is very strong, as it has always been. Free cash was certified earlier this year at its highest level ever at $8.6 million. I do show projected free cash as we make it the whole way through this annual town meeting process, at least as we see it right now, with approaching $6 million. And I haven't been too aggressive with assuming anything out of the ordinary, that although we know some things will be going in, like the sale of the tax title properties, which was very successful in early December. All the while, we are transitioning our financial position and our financial objectives to put more money into stabilization and rely less upon free cash for our reserves. What the two graphs on the right-hand side say is we're doing it very prudently and very conservatively. While we've moved a significant amount of money into stabilization from just over $500,000, currently with over $2.1 million on hand and projected to be a little beyond $3 million after the annual town meeting, we have not depleted our free cash. That shows a very strong financial position, and it shows that we'll be able to complete the transition to having at least 5% within our stabilization account if we continue to manage things this way. And that's further, I think, acknowledged and satisfied through the AAA bond rating that we received this summer from Standard & Poor's, which is the highest rating any entity can have through Standard & Poor's rating services. So we will continue to balance these long-term stable positions with the short-term needs of the community as we operate. From a revenue standpoint, we are proposing the use of $148.9 million for FY21 expenditures, both within the operating budget and some other warrant articles. And so at this time, this is the total ask for funding that we would bring forward to town meeting, although we do have some ways to go in that budget process. And on initial glance, nearly $6.5 million in revenue seems like a relatively easy initiative to take on if we're looking at the operations of the town. But as I mentioned before, there's kind of an underline that we need to look at as we move through this budget process, and that's how much money of that new revenue, the $6.5 million, is actually restricted or can only be used for certain expenditures and could not be applied to just anything that we wanted to apply it. And so that makes up almost $4 million of the $6.5 million that we do propose to use. So we're really limited across the general operating accounts of the town to $2.5 million or 2.66% year over year. With strong economic conditions and growing cost with a lot of those contractors that I previously mentioned, that becomes a greater and greater challenge for us to handle annually. So again, unrestricted revenues that will be applied, to operations are 2.5 of the $6.5 million, or 2.66%. So what falls into the unrestricted category specifically? General tax levy, local receipts, free cash, and other levy reduction funds that we bring in mainly from Selco. And those are largely applied across the operating budget. excuse me. And how did we break out those unrestricted revenues? Ultimately, a little over $1 million fell to the town operations. A little over 1.2 million, almost 1.3, went to the schools, and 207,000 went to other charges, for instance, increased costs from our state charges and assessments, et cetera, that are on the back side of the cherry sheet. The total investment in the schools is slightly higher than this, as we applied some of the restricted state aid into their total budget enhancement that we're recommending at this point in time. On the general municipal side, I'd like to take a few minutes and dive down into how we prepare the town side of the budget using both restricted and unrestricted revenues. And this discussion will include the recommended $1.3 million that we're proposing for the school budget at this time. I can certainly say and echo Dr. Sawyer's comments when he made his budget presentation several weeks ago. This is not a desirable position for us to be in. It has provided great challenges. We work through the budget process. The town manager's position in this community ultimately has the ability to make this initial recommendation to you, to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, but I can tell you it's not enviable because I know that that's not enough money to continue on the school side. And I also do note that we certainly have reduced almost $600,000 from the town department request as initially set forth to me in early December. So across the board, general municipal operations, which include a wide variety of things, and we can apply restricted and unrestricted revenues to, is a proposed increase of $5.6 million. School operations providing a change, at least at this point, from the town manager's perspective, $1.4 million. We see some minor reductions across other categories, including utilities. So how does the general municipal operations, the $71.1 million, break down? On the pure town side of the budget, on our day-to-day operations, we are recommending a budget increase of 3.19%, a little over $1 million. And then several specific categories that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about. The first being health insurance. Health insurance continues to be a major cost factor and driver of our total budget. We are estimating a 7.4% increase, the same amount as in fiscal year 20 budget, which is an $880,600 increase year over year. So if you reflect back to that initial slide, whenever we talked about the unrestricted revenues, we use unrestricted revenues for health insurance, and we're taking $880,000 of the $2.5 million and applying it to our health insurance. We are seeing a good trend in employees moving to our most cost-effective plans, our high deductible plans, and we'll continue to ask employees and incentivize employees to migrate to those plans to manage costs. Debt service is certainly the largest category increase year over year. This is the first year that the entire Beal School project will be on the books from a principal and interest standpoint. And that increase for debt service is 23.4% year over year, or $2.46 million. And utility operations, on the previous slide, I noticed a slight decline in overall utility costs, and those are reflected in capital investments. But on just the operations side, there is a year-over-year increase of $1.2 million, and those funds are raised through the rates of the individual utilities and do not impact the general tax levy. At the bottom of the slide, I have pointed out where certain line items on the town side or municipal side of the budget do benefit the schools, and I don't want anyone to read anything in that. I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible. This is not shifting funds or casting doubt in any way. I certainly have enjoyed and continue to enjoy the benefit of working with Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins in the development of the overall process, and it continues to be a very close and a collegial relationship. But I think it's important that we identify, where the main cost drivers are coming for as we move forward with these tight revenue situations. Doesn't look like I'm getting the whole slide up. But this is a breakdown of our overall funding and how we're recommending the different functional areas. I'll just move beyond the slide and work my way into each functional area throughout the budget. So I will move through a series of slides based upon the functional areas. The first is administration and finance. All the following slides are similar in format. Where on the left side of the screen, you'll see the individual departments that fall into those functional areas. And on the right top side of the screen, you'll see the current staffing levels provided in full-time equivalents or FTEs, and then the aggregate amount of all those departments fall at the bottom right, and are summed up at the level the town meeting votes on them on a department-by-department basis, with personnel costs, general expenses, equipment, and separate appropriations. So within the administration and finance area, we are proposing 0.48 new, or almost a half new FTE within the treasurer collector's office. This position is a 0 year-over-year cost increase upon the budget because the treasurer collector has been successful in reducing expenses, mainly banking fees that we are charged. And that reduction more than offsets the cost of this half-time employee. Within this cost category, there's a total of $991,200 increase year-over-year. $880,600 of that is health insurance. Within the public safety functional area, we're proposing to no increases in full-time equivalents, although the police department initially requested one additional patrol officer that we're not able to fund at this time. It's a total increase of $380,000, with the vast majority of those costs coming in and being related to the cost increases within the fire department personnel area. While we certainly have the benefit of a significant federal grant to offset the cost of 4 new firefighters, it only offsets a portion, although very large, 75% at this time. There are ancillary costs that grant does not cover. And we are also, will be working in an environment throughout the summer months where those 4-time firefighters will be attending the fire academy, and we will need to supplement, although not one-for-one, but supplement and backfill their shifts while they're off receiving their certifications. Moving on to the Department of Public Works non-utility budget. I will dive into each utility in 1 second. We are proposing to increase 1 full-time equivalent within the Public Buildings Department, which would be a custodian for the Parker Road School. Currently, we have no custodians assigned to the Parker Road School, which is a business challenge for us. This single FTE, the full cost is not being borne by the operating budget. This will be offset by a contribution from Selco and a reduction in the operating expenses of the Public Buildings Department as we can reduce the contractor workload within that facility. There is a year-over-year reduction of roughly $11,000. We continue to be in both the reorganizational transition and budget transition for the Department of Public Utilities, so this should be the final year that we're working our way through those transitions. So those numbers are a bit skewed. We're still trying to right size and properly allocate whether costs are centrally funded through the Public Works Administration budget or within each individual utility, which I will get to in a minute. Within the community development functional area, there is a slight increase with additional hours for 1 part-time staff member, which would be within the building inspector's office for an additional assistant building inspector. We are currently funding that workload through contracted staff at a rate of over $70 per hour, so we could find cost efficiencies in doing that. So there is a movement of funds from expenses and into personnel. There's across all 5 of these departments, there's a total cost increase year over year of $32,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Kevin, on cases such as that, could you give us the detail behind the analysis and the risk that we take when we expand the footprint?
Sure.
are now offering health care to that individual that they probably get through their company. And then the matter of the long-term commitment and ultimately a pension.
Sure.
Because I'd just like to see how many years out you plan for that when we make the determination to bring a position in-house.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Within the human services functional area, we are also looking to provide a slight increase in hours to the outreach worker within the Council on Aging. This has been a topic that has been prevalent at prior discussions by this board in partnership with a study that's being conducted, an assessment that's being conducted by Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. And this worker would continue to provide enhanced outreach services to our elder population in conjunction with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. So it takes the position just a little over half-time with the organization. The total increase across all five of these functional areas, or excuse me, all five of these departments is just over $76,000. The largest aspect of this falls within the library, which, is really maintaining their operations. It's not enhancing or augmenting, but, that, budget is a significant aspect of our overall budget of the community. And now I'll dive into each one of the utilities. Within the water department, we're recommending the increase of one full-time equivalent. That would help augment the amount of services that we're able to provide in-house, including our future ongoing new approach to flushing. Having an enhanced level of employees will make this easier. You'll recall earlier this year, we put over $860,000 into an account to help improve water quality, and adding our full-time staff and building this capacity in-house will help us maintain that clean and higher quality water system as far as the unidirectional flushing program goes into the future. You will see a significant cost in the separate appropriations as we continue to understand and right-size the cost of the operation of the new water treatment plant, which has now been operating for about 15 months. Sewer operations, a significant budget increase year over year, although there's no enhancements to the staffing levels. The largest areas are in the expenses, which include repair and maintenance of equipment and systems, and enhanced costs within the treatment of the sewage as we transition and install sewers along Route 20. The cost of sending that flow into the Upper Blackstone is more costly than the current rate in sending it to the Westboro treatment plant, although we gain economic advantages because the Westboro treatment plant is, largely nearing its capacity, and we're nearing our maximum flows that we send there. But also the Westboro treatment plant at the same time is getting more expensive as it goes through a new permitting phase with the Environmental Protection Administration for a new permit, and will have to lower its levels of certain materials that it is able to discharge after its treatment process. Stormwater operations, which is a new utility that was established at the start of this fiscal year, has an increase of roughly $250,000 within the expense area, no increase in staffing. We do see funding coming in consistent with what we anticipated when we set that fee. We'll continue to monitor this new aspect of our organization. So that takes me the whole way through all the functional areas and all the utilities, at least as we're recommending a budget at this time. And one of the initial slides I mentioned that, one of the highlights that we see in the coming years is the debt service reduction, and that will really level off this kind of one-year increase in the cost for the Beal School within 2023, as we see the high school coming off of our debt service obligations in that fiscal year. That will be a reduction year over year from 22 to 23 of nearly $2.6 million. And will continue to decline with our current debt that's on hand, providing additional capacity throughout the future years as we use a declining debt service schedule. So the vast majority of that is exempted debt service, but it is just good to note that, we project a decline in that in the future years.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I'm reading that right, Kevin, the green is the utility?
Yes.
So as we just had the earlier conversation with Selco, though that shows it's not impacting the tax rate or an opportunity cost for our budget because it's paid directly by Selco.
That's correct. Selco's debt that is currently managed through the town and not through MWIC is about $460,000 a year, and they provide us with that money up front right at the beginning of the fiscal year, no impact.
So if you're concerned about debt impacting the operating budget and taking dollars from it, one would look at this and actually only look at the pink and not look at the green.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the timeline for the rest of the process, really fiscal projection one is the first formal presentation of the budget to the public. Again, will be augmented this year by our new budget tool, ClearGov, which will be available online by early next week, and we'll provide a press release at that time notifying our residents of that new tool for them to use. As we work our way throughout the balance of February and into March, there'll be 3 days of Finance Committee hearings where we'll detail every department and every proposed expenditure and answer questions. As we move into April, we'll revise fiscal projection 1 and create fiscal projection 2, and get a recommendation from the Finance Committee to move on to town meeting along with their analysis. And then in May, we'd look for the adoption of this budget, which would start July 1, 2020 for fiscal year 21. That's all I have, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Pretty complete. I don't think we want to dig into the background of all of this tonight. I don't think anybody does, do you? We have the draft budget, though, right?
Yes, the board currently has the numbers, and this ClearGov document will be presented early next week. And fiscal projection 1, the more conventional document, although greatly enhanced even over last year, will be made available later this week.
So you're still going to be refining, or are you, where you think you're going to be on expenditures right now?
Well, right now, like expenditures as presented, as I said, is certainly not what the school is looking for and what Dr. Sawyer had presented as his status quo budget to the school committee. And I noted that we reduced the initial town department request by over $600,000 across all departments. So I honestly don't see a lot of ability to reduce any further. On the town side, we're fortunate enough to be able to offer some new positions, balanced mainly by reducing expenses in other areas. We're fortunate not to have to reduce any full-time equivalents from our model that we're using this year and maintain service levels, which in some areas, that means folks will be stretched even thinner than they are right now. I can't say the same for the schools, but, Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins are still working on what the true impacts of the town manager's recommended number will be on their operations. So we'll continue to look. We've spent a lot of time just getting to a balanced budget, let alone moving any further. We will continue to review any opportunities for that and any ability to introduce new revenues into the mix. But at this point, I see even limited opportunities for that.
But absent any new revenues, this is going to be pretty close.
Absolutely.
Final budget. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I just have a quick comment. I want to compliment you on the presentation. I think you continually improve how you put these materials together. I think this is very accessible, not just to the board, to the general public. And I know that's a focus of what you do. I mean, you're preaching transparency frequently, and you're leading by example. So I compliment you on that. As far as there's time to review, discuss, and deliberate.
thank you. I look
Anyone?
forward to that.
Ms. Gessman?
Again, I echo the sentiments of my colleague that this is very well done. I especially like the way that you broke out health insurance costs and debt service that are related to the schools. I know that people have asked to see that before. There's always a question as to what's the real number? And I think that kind of helps answer the question as to the real number of what kind of financial support goes to the schools. Having watched the school committee meetings from the past couple of weeks, definitely hearing that they are facing challenges in carrying their program forward, but I think it's really important that we highlight that we have those same challenges on the municipal side, and you did a great job of doing that. I would like to see an opportunity to have a more deep discussion about this when it's not so late at night. I think it's unfortunate that this presentation started at 9:45 after we'd already been sitting here for almost 3 hours, because I think the work that goes into it, to not have that opportunity to really sit here and talk about this budget is just a disservice to the effort that's being put in. I have one question, and you can either answer it now or get back to me with it. But out of this budget that you present, how many new positions were requested by departments, and how many are, I know how many are in here, but I'm just wondering what the difference is between what was requested and what's actually being funded.
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I don't know if Mr. Snowden knows it.
We don't need to wait for it. He can email me or text me, or I'll be sleeping, it's fine.
This was a good, we haven't really done this like this before, I don't think. I think good high level, you get a sense of where each functional area is, at least get an order of magnitude, and we can spend some time on the other stuff later, so.
Okay.
Thank you, a lot of work went into that.
Thank you.
Okay. I think all we have left is communications, correct?
Yes, we are at number
23. Okay, item 23 is a letter dated June 30th from John Travers regarding Eagle Scout ceremony on March 29th. There were 4 scouts receiving their Eagle status, and we're invited to go if we can attend. So noted. Item 24 is an email dated January 30th from Kevin Krasinski at Kresnecki, CMRPC, regarding the annual tip development. What that really is about is getting status of the projects and updates from the communities about where they are. So sometimes things change as a result of that when people aren't ready, but anyways.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
In the coming weeks, could we have a little update as to where we think our next project might be? My recollection is we are always in a good position because of advanced design work done by internal engineering.
We currently don't have anything in the tip, right? The only thing that we have is the state project on
Right,
Route
just
20.
the Grafton Street Route 20 state project.
Because we just finished up Main Street. So there is nothing at the moment.
Okay.
We can
Should
look
we
into
make
that
something?
further. We can look into that further.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the thought was, let them finish that up in
What's the that you're referring to?
West Main Street.
Oh, yes.
Get West Main Street finished up. Yeah, I know engineering had been talking about Boylston Street.
Okay, thank you.
That'll be a major rework. Item 25 is a letter dated February 3rd from Timothy Deschamps, Central Mass Mosquito Control. Our assessment this year is $87,996. Okay, item 26 is a letter dated February 5th from Keith Elms, Animal Control Officer, regarding the nuisance dog on Rice Street. Bina has been unrolled, and there have been no other complaints on that, so that's good news. Item 27 is a letter dated February 6th from Shonda Green, Department of Telecommunications and Cable, regarding the license expiration notice. That is for the cable license. It's expiring in 2023, and we could conceivably start the renewal process in another month if we wanted to. don't think, I mean, if you read the details on it, I don't think that we're gonna go there, but we do have to notice, the Lake Department as the licensee, within 30 months of the 30 months, minimum 30 months prior to the expiration date. So that's something we can consider at a later date. Item 28 is an email dated February 27th from, email dated February 7th from Brian Moss, 16 Ruthin Circle, again for requesting that the town notify women about the latest fluoride study linked to reduced IQ in children. So noted at this point, I think. Does anybody want to do anything with this on a future agenda, or? I don't think things have changed since the last time, and I know that there's another meeting with the Board of Health, so.
So this is on the Board of Health's agenda?
Not this exactly, but it's related to this, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else to come before the board in open session? Anything none, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So voted. This meeting is adjourned.